Sweeter Than Honey, an Emerald Duo Podfic, written by CleanLenins, on AO3, and read by Heo Stories. Chapter 5. Technoblade dreamed. He didn't dream of anything in particular. Not really. He dreamed of chasing stars through an infinite sky, the little lights singing with flute-like trills. He dreamed he was floating on a clear blue sea, buoyant and safe as the waves caressed him in their calm embrace. He dreamed he stood in a flower field, surrounded by the scents of every impossible petal. He dreamed that he launched in clouds made of sugar, never worried about falling to the ground below, as he lingered on the memory of sweetness. Every dream felt as real as it felt nonsensical. Colors he couldn't name painted impossible backdrops, scraps of song that left the lingering taste of rosemary on the tips of his tongue. Pleasant and unfamiliar in their cadence. Unfamiliar smells that left him aching for a memory he can't remember ever having. It was beautiful. It was new. It was a little overwhelming. He felt a bit stretched by it all, like a beggar presented with a feast. Too much, too fast, he indulged in the fantastical nature of his own dreams. He thinks he woke up a few times. Not more than for just a few seconds, just enough that he could catch a bit of a lullaby being hummed, the soft touch of someone adjusting a blanket over his shoulders. Usually, the moment of wakefulness was gone before he even recognized it had occurred. With one exception. He woke up with a whine in his throat. A sound he wasn't sure a human could actually make. Techno was confused. First about where he was, who he was, what was happening. But then he could only notice the deep ache around his shoulder blades. He whined again, shifting with his fist clutching onto something, a blanket maybe? He was laying on his stomach, and the motion made the ache slightly worse. It felt like when he had pulled a muscle, a deep tug, where it had been stretched too much, but in this case slightly dulled. Maybe from exhaustion, maybe something else. He tried to blink, to flutter his eyes open, to figure out what was happening. A hand brushed against his head, full setting over his eyes and blocking his sight. He grumbled with confusion and tried to move his arm to pull the hand away, but just the little twitch of his finger made him ache even worse. I know, a voice said. It was familiar. Somewhere in his memories he had heard it, though something about it was different. A gentle pressure rubbed between his shoulder blades, giving no physical relief, but settling something in his heart. This is incredibly uncomfortable, isn't it, mate? It's a bad time for you to try and wake up. Techno whined, unable to get his mouth to move to form words for how he felt. Shh, I know. Not feeling well, and you don't know why. Very confusing. Techno melted into the blankets as the hand gently combed through his hair, every nerve ending singing with a bliss at the touch. But you can't be awake right now. Go on. Back to your dreams, Technoblade. Everything's fine. A small, stubborn part of Technoblade resented the words, foolishly fighting against the inescapable request. He scrunched up his face, trying to blink with his eyes open. But the voice just giggled. Oh, so stubborn. Oh, you're so stubborn. And Techno felt joy at the sound of the giggling, his resolve crumbling, and his consciousness slipping closer back to sleep. Back to where I should be. What about a story? Something to wish you off to sleep? Alright. Once upon a time, Technoblade was swept away before the story even began. So he drifted, and he drifted, and he drifted, lost in the ebb and pull of the sea of sleep. Sweet dreams were the only thing he existed in, losing the thread of what was reality actually felt like. He thought reality might have been annoying, which is why he came to the conclusion that this was probably not a dream. He was a little annoyed. Technoblade was laying on something soft and warm. His face squished against it. He frowned, trying to figure out why he suddenly felt so irritated when he had just been having a fantastic dream. He had been the ruler of an empire made of snow. It was fun. This wasn't fun. There were voices speaking, droning on and on. He couldn't be bothered to focus on what they were saying. He just wanted them to be quiet. He felt something touch his back. Wait, was that his back? It was behind him, but it felt different, somehow new. It reminded him of when he had lost a tooth as a kid, the absence revealing a new sensation he never noticed. Something touched him again, the same place, and his frown deepened. It didn't hurt, it was pleasant if he was honest. But this was definitely what pulled him from his empire dream. Annoyed. At the next touch, Techno tried to pull away from the touch, and it worked. Somehow, things shifted and the touch was gone. It felt really weird, almost like moving his arm when it fell asleep. All tingly with a slight ache, but it worked. The touch disappeared, and Technoblade felt a little bit smug. Then something touched his cheek, and he felt annoyed again. Are you awake? Starting to wake up? A voice said quietly. Techno grumbled, shifting to press his whole face in the softness below him. The voice laughed. Then there was something pressing against his hair, brushing it so gently that Technoblade melted into a puddle. Feeling a bit grumpy? Maybe he was, but he didn't feel like giving the voice the satisfaction of knowing that. So he made the correct decision and said nothing. But then the touch appeared again, brushing against the weird new sensation. Techno grumbled and tried to scoot his whole body away from the touch. He didn't move very far before he decided it wasn't worth it. The touch stopped though, so win for him. Technoblade, the voice said, and Technoblade's heart did a funny little jump. Gods could probably count on his fingers how many times someone had referred to him by his full name. Don't you want to wake up? You've been asleep for a while. Did Technoblade want to wake up? He wasn't sure. If you wake up, I'll give you a snack. I'm sure you're hungry. The voice murmured. Maybe some cookies? Just don't tell your mom that it's the first thing I gave you. Technoblade grumbled, not really wanting to go through the hassle of waking up, but his stomach growled. And, well, cookies. He was strangely certain that cookies would be delicious. You're going to have to sit up for cookies, mate, the voice said, and Technoblade grumbled, complained. Gosh, you really are so hard to wake up, aren't you? Sleeper boy. or a morning person at all. Come on, Technoblade. Why don't I not start by opening those eyes? Hmm? Can you open your eyes for me? Techno huffed, turning so his face wasn't so squished and carefully peeling open one eye, peeking through his lashes. He immediately closed it with a pained whine. Oh, it is a bit bright. I'm sorry, Technoblade. I can dim the light a bit. The light beyond his eyelids darkened, but Technoblade kept his eyes resolutely closed. Technoblade was certain he had been blinded by light waking up before. He was having a hard time determining what was a dream and what wasn't, but he was definitely sure he had been blinded by light while waking up before. And it wasn't like this. Flashes of moving color interspersed with incomprehensible squiggles, and it hurt. Honestly, cookies weren't worth that. Come on, mate. Give it another shot. You can do it, Technoblade. Technoblade sighed, his name flowing over him like cool water, comfortably, cradling, commanding. With great reluctance, he opened his eyes again. He shuttered it immediately, whining loudly. A voice somewhere stopped speaking. The hand returned, patting his hair. You have to be quiet right now, Technoblade. Your mother is trying to work. We have to be very quiet. Technoblade huffed, pressing his face back into the softness. He would be incredibly quiet if he could just go back to sleep. Dreams were better than this. Technoblade. The voice was incredibly fond. Come on, mate, try again. I want to see those eyes. Can you do that for me? Show me your eyes. Technoblade started to shake his head no out of spite, and yet he didn't move. Technoblade frowned. The hand stopped patting his hair, one thing rubbing at the crease of his brow. Technoblade, one more try. One more try. Then you can have cookies, okay? Technoblade groaned but slowly cracked an eye open. It hurt, but he tried to push through the hurt, blinking rapidly. The person was obviously not going to stop pestering him. As he blinked, it started to get less painful. He could still see the wandering squiggle and the strange colors, what appeared to be light bending around himself in the air, but he could manage. It took him a few seconds to figure out what he was looking at, though. Everything looked so different, like looking through a glass prism. Everything was colored oddly and skewed. Bits of light and rainbow and color in his vision that he couldn't explain, but he wasn't laying on a pillow. He was laying on someone's lap. A hand gently cupped his cheek, and Technoblade looked up. Someone was staring down at him, a grin on their face. Techno looked at them, confused. Did he know this person? He felt like he knew this person. He couldn't place them. Technoblade frowned deeply, trying to figure it out. There you are, finally awake, the person said fondly. Mostly, anyways. Do you want me to help you sit up? Technoblade considered the offer before he scowled. He shifted, trying to get one arm under him with great effort. He pushed up, levering himself. He raised a few inches before his arm gave out from under him. His limbs felt like jelly, clumsy and weak. The only thing preventing him from slamming face first against the man's lap was the sudden hands on his shoulder. Here, I'll help, the person said, and they did. Techno blinked at them, studying their face as they helped hoist Technoblade up until he could sit, only slightly listening to one side. He was certain he knew the person, but it was like something was different. Something brushed against Techno's back, startling him. He turned his head to look behind. The person gently beside him gently grabbed his cheek, preventing him from turning. Don't look yet, mate. The man, chuckled slightly. Technoblade leaned into their palm. That might not be a good idea until the crowd is gone for the day, actually. The man took his other hand, setting one finger gently on Technoblade's lips. Technoblade looked at him curiously. No speaking or making noise of any kind, as long as there are humans in court, Technoblade. The man said. Technoblade frowned. A strange, twisting sensation in his throat made him swallow convulsively. Just to be safe. I'll remove that later, when everything's finished, alright? Technoblade nodded, not really understanding. He reached his hand to touch his throat, not feeling anything different. Good. Now, where did I put those cookies? The man leaned to the side. Techno whined as the man moved, the darkness around him shifting and letting him more light in. Techno rubbed at his eye before pausing to stare at the blanket of darkness surrounding him. That was a wing. The guy had wings. Technoblade was almost shocked, except he had a pretty surreal dream where he was a bunny, so maybe this was another dream? He couldn't be bothered to think about it. Guy had wings. Okay, then whatever. That was probably important, but he also had cookies. Technoblade perked up as the man pulled a cookie out of a black spatula. The guy snorted at his expression. The man's wing moved again, stretching to wrap around Technoblade to once again block some of the light. Come on, mate. Come sit right next to me. You can have as many as you want, the man said. Technoblade nodded quickly, leaning forward to slide closer to the man. He tapped, suddenly unbalanced, an unfamiliar weight on his back, throwing him off. Instead of just sitting beside the man, he ended up falling onto the man's side. Technoblade blushed, instantly trying to pull away, but an arm over his shoulder kept him in place. The man was laughing at him. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh at that. Technoblade scowled at the man. The man's blonde hair fell in his face as he looked down at Technoblade. I forgot you were going to be a bit unbalanced for a while. Just for a day or two, but I'm also not going to complain. The man squeezed Techno's shoulders, and Techno relaxed. Touch so incredibly pleasant, warm. Comfort beamed directly into his heart. Techno leaned his head against the man. Techno blinked as a cookie was held right in front of his face. As promised, the man said. Technoblade reached out and grabbed the little cookie. There was something familiar about it. Some memory trying to come up back in the back of his mind. He stared at it an inch from his brain, telling him that he had seen this cookie before and that it was something important. Someone had given it to him. Someone named. His stomach growled and he decided it was completely unimportant before shoving the entire cookie in his mouth. Technoblade! The man wheezed, covering his mouth to keep quiet as Techno chewed. Please! Please! Take sensible bites. God, why am I even surprised? Technoblade didn't respond, too intent on chewing the cookie. And as delicious as it was, he couldn't save it. as his empty stomach was suddenly the only thing he could think of. The gnawing hunger made him grimace, swallowing the cookie after only a few times. I guess it has been a few days since you last ate, the man mused, holding out another cookie. Technoblade reached for it, but the man pulled it back. Slowly, don't shove it in all at once. Technoblade gave the man a deadpan look before nodding. The man handed him the cookies. Technoblade shoved it in with 2 bites. The man wheezed again, holding Technoblade close as he chewed it for his life. God, you are just perfect. You're already twisting my words against me. You are going to be a menace. I can't not wait, the man said through his breathless laughter. A little perfect little bird. I'm so grateful. Techno frowned, chewing slowly in thought. Perfect? He wasn't perfect. He knew he wasn't perfect. He was. Hey, don't think so hard. You're alright, the man said, offering another cookie. Techno glared at it. The cookie obviously broken in half. Everything is alright. The words rang true in his ears, and Technoblade relaxed against the man, taking half the cookie in his hand. He brought it to his lips, ready to eat it, but he paused, looking at the cookie. If he was hungry, then. Technoblade looked up at the man looking down at him curiously, tilting his head to the side. Yes, the man said. Technoblade offered him the cookie in his hand, tilting his head to the side in a mirror of the blond man. The man looked at him fondly. No, mate, those are your cookies, remember? They're gifts from me? You promised you wouldn't share them. Did Technoblade do that? He didn't remember. He frowned, looking down at his cookie. Why didn't he remember? He shifted nervously, startling when he felt a strange sensation twitch on his back. Technoblade tried to turn his head, but once again the man gently cupped his cheek, pressing him to lay against the man's shoulder. The man's wing wrapped around him, pressing close against Technoblade's back. It was a strange yet comforting feeling. No, don't look. Don't look at that yet, Technoblade. Let's vote for your mum, alright? The man said. Techno huffed but leaned more against him. I'd rather her be here and the humans gone when you completely wake up, if I can help it. And seeing that might just startle you enough to do it. Technoblade pressed even closer to the man, curling his legs up to wedge himself at an angle. Oh no, you're really out of it, aren't you, mate? The man said, and Technoblade ate the half of a cookie in his hand as the man caressed Technoblade's hair, long pink strands falling across Technoblade's face. Something about that seemed wrong to Technoblade. Like, he didn't expect to see the pink strands, but a jolt of satisfaction pinged through his heart at the sight. Technoblade couldn't resist leaning into the man's hand, nearly toppling again before the man caught him. Technoblade glared as the man snorted, burying his face in Technoblade's untied hair. I'm sorry, but your face is just. It's too hilarious. I just can't. Your Majesty, I beg you to do something about this. This is harassment. A voice shouted, and Technoblade flinched violently at the sudden noise. Instantly, arms and wings surround him, pulling him tightly into an embrace. Bits of light peeked through the feathers like stars, but otherwise he could see nothing. Harassment? Technoblade heard another voice say. This one wasn't nearly as loud, and yet it got his full attention, like gravity. He couldn't help but be pulled towards it. It demanded his attention in a way that was inescapable. He leaned towards the sound just a hair. Yes, isn't it obvious that we are being tormented? The voice screeched again. It was deeper voice, a man's voice. Blade scrunched up his face in confusion. It was a familiar voice, one he couldn't put his finger on. The arms around him held him tighter. In what way? Blade leaned towards that voice, where that voice was coming from. So soothing, like water on a hot day, or a warm blanket next to the fire in the middle of winter. Much closer to him than the angry voice. But the arms around him didn't loosen, didn't let him move more than a millimeter. The slugs, the snails, I don't even want to know what these are. These awful slimy bugs that are crawling all over us. You cannot tell me that these stinking, sticky, disgusting creatures are not sent here to harass us. The male voice said again, and something in Technoblade shrunk away from the anger there. He pressed his face in the man's shirt, hiding his face even though he couldn't see. Oh, I don't think they're disgusting. They're just little guys. The nice voice said. But if they bother you that much, you're always free to leave, King Beaton. I'm not holding you hostage here. I don't expect to be able to come back, though. You will not be welcomed here again, the nice voice said. Your Majesty, truly this isn't just. Another voice, this one feminine. It is clearly a ploy at intimidation from the people who seek to steal our daughter from us. Just? I disagree. Such creatures are always free to roam our court, whether they are incentivized to be here or not. Nice voice said. Blade didn't know how he knew, but he knew that voice was grinning, and the pure cheer in the air had him grinning as well, unboring his face from the man's shoulder. As for intimidation, are you telling me you are intimidated so easily from a few little slugs? A few? These have to be thousands. They are all over us. Is that what all you are willing to sacrifice for the people you love? The nice voice continued, unbothered. It's for your family, isn't it? Can't you deal with a little unpleasantness? Well, it will all be worth it if the deal is broken, don't you think? Then everything can go back to normal for you. Of course, we would endure more than this for our children, but then this conversation is settled. The nice voice half sung. There was a long pause before the nice voice sighed deeply. I suppose we could end here for today. I honestly hoped we'd be finished by now, though. This just keeps getting drawn out. So many interruptions. Would you agree with adjourning for today, Queen Jessel? Yes, please. I would be delighted to continue this tomorrow. The other voice, Queen Jessel, said. Blade's frowned deeper. That name was so familiar. That voice too. It was on the tip of his tongue. Very well, the nice voice said. There was a slight pause before she continued. Tomorrow will probably be the last day, I think. We don't have many more testimonies to go through. Tell me, will your youngest be joining us? We will have to see, Your Majesty. Blade's attention to the conversation was beginning to wane. Things stiff, he thought, while he was pressed against the man's arm. He has been so sick, it might not be possible. We don't want him to get worse. Blade stiffened and gagged. the air suddenly feeling oily and tainted against his skin. A bitter and gritty taste on his tongue wiped away the taste of sugar from moments before. The man pressed his cheek against his own and whispered a comforting murmur into his ear. I see. Well, I don't want to ask you to drag a sick child out of their bed, but you should be aware that this affects him just as much as it affects the four of you. The nice voice said, their words clearing the air slightly of the noise sensation. We understand, Queen Chessel said. We we will have the family physician look over him to see if he can make the trip tomorrow. Technoblade gagged again, toxic sensation once more cloying the air. He squished his face against the man's shoulder, trying to hide from the unpleasantness. The grip on Technoblade lessened as the man gently rubbed circles between Technoblade's shoulders. Do what you must, the voice said again. Until tomorrow? Yes, until Queen Cheddar got himself off. Technoblade tried to ignore her voice completely, praising for her to say something foul and foul the air once more. So he didn't hear the soft steps behind him. He's awake? A whispered voice, the nice voice from before, asked. Technoblade started at how close it was. Mostly, the man said, and Technoblade noticed the change in light as the man lifted. Technoblade kept his face buried in the man's shoulder. He's not quite shaken off that last bit of sleep tied to his name. No, he will eventually, just give him a bit of time. Technoblade twitched as another hand brushed against his hair. It wouldn't be so hard on him if someone had picked a dream and stuck with it instead of constantly changing it. I couldn't help it, Kristen. He likes stories. I just wanted him to have all the nice dreams, the man defended. I understand, Filza. The nice voice, Kristen said. Fingers scratched as Technoblade's scalp, and Technoblade melted. I'm just saying, it might be one reason he isn't completely awake yet. Filza? Did Technoblade know that name? It felt... maybe? It seemed somewhat familiar. Technoblade shifted around, lifting his head slightly and wincing at the light again. He's really quiet, is he, usually? Oh, I did a little thing to make sure he was quiet while the humans are here. Just to be safe. I don't know how he will react when... Yeah, that makes sense. Did he see? No, not yet. I thought it might freak him out a bit, and I thought you wouldn't want to be here for that. I do. Kristen's voice was bright with excitement. The hand in Technoblade's hair moved, and Technoblade pouted. He felt Kristen's hand settle while his neck met his shoulder. Can you sit up for me, Technoblade? Technoblade groaned in protest, but the only sound was a deep exhale of breath. But Kristen and Filsa laughed, gently tugging and pushing at him to sit up instead of leaning against Phil. It was incredibly unfair. Technoblade stared at Filsa, looking supremely unamused. Filsa grinned, completely unaffected by Technoblade's terrifying pout. Technoblade jolted, though, when Kristen moved behind him, touching that weird sensation, tugging on it gently. Technoblade turned to look, and Filsa didn't stop him. He blinked in awe. He had never seen Kristen before. That he was certain. He wouldn't forget that. She smiled wildly at him, and it seemed to cut right to his center. He felt warm to his very core, like seeing the miracle of sunrise for the first time. But if a smile was the sun, Then her eyes were the moon, for they changed like the faces as he watched, shimmering incandescent purple, twinkling as she grinned. Her dark wavy hair fell gracefully over her shoulder, each strand so dark the night would be envious. An aura of light swirled around her, and Technoblade desired to press himself against it, to be hidden in it, to be surrounded by it. Technoblade, you're not supposed to be staring at me, Kristen teased. Technoblade frowned, not really sure why he was supposed to be staring, if not at her. She shifted something in her hands, and Techno looked down at the movement. She was holding something white and puffy. Technoblade blinked at it, taking a moment to realize it wasn't fluff from a pillow. Feathers? Yeah, those are feathers. Technoblade looked at it with confusion. Why was he looking at feathers? He glanced at Kristen for a second before looking back at her hands. He squirmed and watched as the feathers twitched. Kristen gently shifted her hands on the feathery thing, and Technoblade was startled at the sensation on his back. As he watched with shock as the feathery thing jolted as well. Feathery thing? He knew what that was. It was the same both Kristen and Filsa had. It was a wing. And he could feel it. Huh? Technoblade said, completely baffled. Kristen and Phil both cackled at the noise. I guess Schlack got all the humans out of the way. Kristen grinned at Filsa. Techno reached out a hand and touched the wing. The feathers were so soft, so small, when he compared them to Filsa and Kristen. Little bits and flecks of gold were scattered here and there, without order. He buried his fingers in them and marveled at the strange sensation. Kristen let go of the wing, letting it fall back down. Technoblade frowned as he tried to maneuver it back into his side, but it just flapped clumsily, completely out of his control. What do you think, mate? Filsa drew Technoblade's attention. Technoblade looked at him before turning to try and look at the wing again. I don't know. He tilted his head slightly. His voice sounded strange, the cadence unfamiliar. Soft? You said you wanted wings before, didn't you? Phil scooted closer. Technoblade immediately leaned against him. Did I? Technoblade asked languidly. Phil hummed a yes. Oh. Still out of it then, Kristen said warmly. Don't worry. You'll remember in time. Are you hungry? It's been a while since you ate. Yes, Technoblade said instantly, then turned to look fully at Filsa. Do you have more cookies? Mate. Filsa, seriously? He's asleep for days and the first thing you give him is a cookie? Kristen scolded, but she didn't seem particularly angry. In my defense, Filsa said, wrapping his arms around Technoblade's shoulder, I was bribing him. Kristen's laughter was like a peal of bells, light and lovely. Technoblade grinned at her joy before getting slightly distracted as he caught the movement of his own wings fluffing up. Well, he should eat something a little more nutritional, don't you think? Kristen said. Technoblade watched as she cupped her palms, the light around her swirling around her hands. Technoblade watched in awe as the light shifted and stuck together, coalescing into a glided round shape, a golden apple. A little safer than a pomegranate, yeah? Kristen smiled. Technoblade hesitantly reached a hand out to grab the fruit. I'd hate for you to choke on a seed. And much less messy. Technoblade turned the apple in his hands. It cut the light in strange ways. Or maybe it was giving off its own light? Technoblade pressed his fingertips against it and felt slight give in the fruit's flesh. Two hands wrapped around his own, lifting his hands towards his face. Technoblade glanced up at Kristin as she directed the apple to his mouth. It's delicious, I promise. Go on now, you must be starving. Kristen urged. Technoblade nodded his head, biting into the apple. He had no control of his wings batting against Filsa's, the appendages fluttering with delight. Filsa didn't seem to mind, though, gently pressing his own wing against Techno's back. The sensation soothed something deep in his heart. Technoblade munched on the apple. His eyelids drooped. Technoblade swaying slightly as he was overwhelmed by the sense of safety. But he still is really out of it. It's adorable, Kristen said as she cupped his cheek. Technoblade leaned away from Phil so he could chase the sensation, pressing against the hand on his cheek. I think he might be a little bit touched off love. His origins weren't exactly the most attractive. Little bird, don't worry, we'll fix that, Kristen said, and then she pressed against Technoblade's other side, sandwiching him in between Phil's and Kristen's shoulders. Technoblade let himself go completely limp, held up by them. They sat like that, Kristen idly running her fingers through Technoblade's hair, until Technoblade only had the core left in his hands. Will you flinch with that? Technoblade hesitated. He still felt hungry, but there wasn't much left. I guess. Kristen gently took the core from his hands. He watched as it started to fade, colors dancing off it like dust as it disappeared into the air. The little cloud emerged with the constant pulsing light around Kristen. Technoblade blinked, confused. What did you do? Technoblade asked. Kristen hummed. You're done, so we didn't need it anymore. Right, but what did it? What did it? Technoblade struggled to find the right words. It's magic, mate, Filsa said. Technoblade turned to look at him and grinned when Filsa handed him another cookie. The apple was made of magic. Once we didn't need it to be an apple anymore, it just became magic. And then it went back to its source of magic. Me, Kristen interrupted, booping Technoblade on the nose. But it was an apple, Technoblade said, around the cookie in his mouth. Yes, but it was also magic, Kristen nodded. To the human eye, there would be no difference. It would taste the same, look the same, act the same as any apple would. The only difference is that it is also magic. And magic can return to being magic. So, I just ate magic? Technoblade asked slowly, grabbing the next cookie Filsa handed to him. He could see the faint shimmer of light around it. You ate an apple. That's origin and end was magic, Kristen answered. Just as you're eating cookies that began as magic and will end as magic. If I eat them, do they still end in magic? Technoblade asked. Kristen snorted. Of course. They became part of your magic. Technoblade stopped chewing, thinking hard. I have magic? He scrunched up his face and thought. That didn't seem right. An inkling of memory tugging out of his state of contentment. He couldn't have magic. He was human, right? And he had never studied magic at the magic university. Not like there was someone he knew who studied magic, right? It was yes, Technoblade. You have magic, Kristen said. Technoblade slumped against her at the sound of his name, not interested in piecing together his thoughts when his name echoed in his ears with her voice. Kristen pressed a kiss to his hair. Sweet little bird, are you tired? Technoblade wanted to deny being tired, but the words wouldn't leave his lips. Yeah, but I don't want to sleep yet. I just woke up, he said instead. You said I had magic, but I thought Technoblade's mouth moved, but no sound came out. He blinked in shock and tried again. His lips moved, but no noise. He raised his head and glanced up at Kristen. She was frowning, and Technoblade shrunk back, worried that he said something wrong. He opened his mouth to apologize, but no sound came out. Filsa, Kristen said, her voice flat. Technoblade shrunk down more, and Filsa's arms wrapped around him. I've got him, Filsa answered. Kristen nodded, her brow furrowing as she frowned, but she met Technoblade's eye, and her expression softened. All right, Technoblade. Don't worry, I'm not mad at you. Technoblade slumped, heavy in relief, pressing against Phil. I've just got to take care of something rude, and I'll be back, alright? Technoblade nodded, incredibly glad he hadn't messed up. He always messing us up, right? Technoblade frowned at the thought, but Filsa reached up and pressed Technoblade's head against the man's shoulder. Another cookie entered his side. He grabbed it. Technoblade watched Kristen walk away with dismay, chewing the cookie more out of habit than enjoyment. He stared after her with worry, stiffening when she vanished from sight. All he could see was the cloth wall around him, heavy fabric making the boundaries of his whole world. And Kristen had left it. No more Kristen. She was gone. Filsa moved his arm from Technoblade's shoulder, and Technoblade felt even more stressed for a moment before Phil began gently sifting through Technoblade's feathers with one hand. Technoblade instantly relaxed. His eyelids fluttered as he idly listened to the voices outside. Filsa was humming softly as he continued to preen the fluffy down with one hand. It's incredibly rude for you to invade my court like this, humans, Technoblade heard Kristen say. So, she wasn't gone. You just couldn't see her. Her voice was cool, completely different from the way she spoke to him. Techno took another bite of the cookie and leaned closer into Filsa. What possibly reason could you have for insulting me this way? We know this is an intrusion, a small voice replied. Techno stiffened and stopped eating, suddenly incredibly interested in the conversation. We know that this isn't the proper way to go about it, but we don't have any other option, another voice said. Techno lifted his head, all attention on the conversation. He knew that voice. He was certain he knew that voice. It was... Please, we just need your help. I don't see any reason I should help when you have done nothing but invade my home. Kristen's voice was frigid, and Technoblade. A touch of worry flickered in his heart, not for himself, but for the voices. He knew them, and he didn't want Kristen mad at him. If he could just remember who they were. He needed to remember right now. Then he could tell Kristen and please, we beg you to hear us out. A child's life might be at stake. One of the voices pleaded. Blade pulled away from Filsa slightly, Cookie forgotten as he tried to look through the heavy cloth, trying to peek outside the fabric walls. Filsa wrapped an arm around Technoblade's shoulders, holding him in place. Filsa leaned close to Technoblade's ear. Everything's alright, mate. Filsa whispered, it's okay. The words didn't comfort him, even if they sounded like truth. Technoblade knew those voices, he knew them. Technoblade tugged against Filsa's arm. Fine, I will listen, but know that I promise you nothing. Not even that you will leave the squad safely. Kristen's voice said, and Technoblade's heart skipped a beat. He needed the voice to be safe. He fought with increased effort to get out of Filsa's arms. Filsa used both arms to pull him closer while whispering reassurances. It's about the youngest prince, a voice wavered. You knew the instant they gave the excuse, but they lied, he's not sick. Technoblade twisted and turned in Filsa's grip, his tiny wings hitting the man in the face. Techno pressed and pulled, completely dropping the cookie to pry himself out of Filsa's grip. I did not lie to, Kristen said wryly. I am used to humans lying to me, though. And it wasn't exactly important. The youngest prince, as you call him, is not needed in attendance for my decision. He's missing, one of the voices said louder than the other. He hasn't been seen by anyone for 2 days. And that's just if the king and queen haven't lied to us. I've had every one of his guards look everywhere. Technoblade's flailing led to him punching Filsa in the gut. The man's grip loosened with an oof. Technoblade took advantage and threw himself from Filsa, quickly crawling over to the semi-opaque fabric. He ignores Filsa's swears behind him, pressing against the fabric to look down. He could barely see through the fabric. It was dusk outside. The sun was setting quickly. I don't know what you want from me, Kristen said once more. She towered over everyone, sitting regally in the throne. Please. Two men stood at her feet, side by side, one speaking, had his hands pressed together as he pleaded. Technoblood noticed his aura of magic sitting on his skin. He reminded Technoblade of warm soup and crushing hugs, and Techno knew him. We need help finding His Highness. He's just 13. Anything could have happened to him. He's our responsibility, the other man said, the one dressed in armor. Techno stared at his distressed face, certain he knew him, and desperately trying to find the memory. He could only recall breathless laughter and endless teasing. We just want to know he's safe. If you could lend any help in finding him. Technoblade's disjointed thoughts clicked together, the last traces of fog in his thoughts blowing away. Scappy, bad! Techno tried to shout. His lips moved and he could feel the sound in his throat, but no sound came out. Techno stared down in horror as Scappy and Bellhead stood before the Queen of the Face throne, asking for a deal. Arms wrapped around him and lifted, pulling him away from the fabric of the palanquin. He was in the palanquin, high above the ground, near the Queen of the Face ear. Techno shrieked at the top of his lungs, but not even a whisper of sound. It's alright, Technoblade. Everything is going to be alright. Calm down, mate. Filsa, no. Phil? Filsa? Was Phil? Muttered in his ear. Techno thrashed, trying to move from where he was pinned against Phil's chest. Black wings rose in Techno's periphery, cutting off what little light there was. Techno tried to bash his head into Phil's nose. Why should I help you? Techno heard Kristen, no, the Queen of the Fae, say. The black feathers came up and completely blocked Techno's vision. What would you give me in exchange for my help? Techno screeched soundlessly, writhing in Phil's arms, and shouting Bad and Scappy's name in the vain hope that they would hear him, to stop them, to save them. Anything. Scappy replied instantly. Techno froze in place like a statue. He didn't even dare to breathe. I sense honesty in your words, but do you really know what you could lose in this? Do you truly understand you are offering? Phil whispered comforting words in Techno's ear, but he didn't hear anything except Bad and Scappy and the Queen. I do, Bad said, and if you can help us find him, safe and sound, then anything you ask will be worth it. We care about him, Scappy asked. We care about him so much, we just want him to be safe. Techno's heart lifted for a moment at the words, before he felt like it was being ripped from his chest, because they was trading themselves away from him. They were trading themselves away when he was already lost. Oh God, what had he done? If you're sure, then I will accept your request, the Queen of the Fae said, not nearly as cold as before. I will help you see the young prince again, safe and sound. Techno sobbed, slumping against while Phil's arms wrapped around him. Tears dripped down his cheek as he sat limp in Phil's embrace. Phil hesitantly loosened his grip, and as Techno cried, "We are grateful for your help, your majesty." Techno heard Bad say. Techno didn't fight Phil as the fairy turned him around, pressing Techno's face into Phil's shoulder. "We are," Scappy agreed before continuing, slightly nervous. "But, what exactly do you want from us in return?" Phil wrapped his arms around Techno in a tighter hug, and Techno sobbed harder. "I will tell you once you have seen the youngest prince again," the Queen said. "I will not demand my payment until the deal is seen through to the end. You will not complain when it comes to you, understood?" "Yes, Majesty," they both said. Techno twisted Phil's shirt in his fist. "Good. Now, leave the way you came. Our business is done. And I will not have you intrude my home any longer," Techno heard the Queen say. "Of course," Bad said, and there was a shifting of fabric, and soft footsteps faded into the forest. But Techno knew they were truly gone when his voice returned. He yelled in pain, the sound nowhere near human, as it was impossibly shrill. The air seemed to crack under it. He didn't realize at first he was keeping. "Don't hurt them, please! You can't! They didn't do anything wrong! Don't hurt them!" Techno shrieked. He beat his fist against Phil's shoulder, barely able to move with how he was pinned in Phil's arms. "It's okay, Technoblade. It's not gonna be—" "No!" Techno's voice seemed to be both jump and down and up and down an octave. "It's not okay! Don't hurt them!" A cold hand pressed against his back, right between his wings. It felt like ice, and Techno flinched before his whole body slowly went limp. All his emotions drained away. The energy pulled from his limbs and collected in the palm of the cold hand. And then the cold hand was gone, and Techno blinked tiredly with a weak hiccup. "I see the feelings mutual, then. Kristen, the Queen, Kristen?" said. Techno whined when the hands started sorting through his dishevelled feathers, but a different set of hands kept him from moving away. "They are, if close, if I had to guess. His gods raised him more than the king or queen, Filzer said, rubbing soothing circles against Techno's arm. Probably some other staff at the castle as well. He mentioned the one helping color his hair. Technoblade's breath hitched, a spark of anxiety in his chest, quickly doused by Kristen pressing her fingers along his neck. I noticed her. She was chatting quite a lot with Puffy. It would be pretty easy to convince Puffy to... I already asked, Phil responded. Puffy's already working on it. Don't. Techno cried weakly. Don't hurt. Don't worry, Technoblade. Everything will be fine. Kristen's voice was so sweet, and the way she spoke to his name made his thoughts gather into pure bliss. He was having trouble holding on to his outrage. We're not going to break any of your things. We just need to collect them all before they get lost, right? You wouldn't want to leave any of your stuff behind, now would we? Techno tried to answer, his words sticking to the roof of his mouth and coming out unintelligible as his eyes closed. It's going to be alright, Technoblade. Kristen cooed. Her hands stopped touching his feathers. He needs to sleep right now, and he's eating something. Being made takes so much energy. He's going to get tired easily for a while, and tomorrow is going to be exhausting on the little bird. You're right, of course you are. Techno sighed. Techno grunted as he was shifted around, pressed into the cushions on his side. The shadow of dismay in his heart kept threatening to grow. Arms wrapped around him, a cold palm pressed into his chest right over his heart. He shivered as the cold invaded his chest. He was pressed against Kristen, the queen, Mum? He was confused, warbled his confusion, a strange noise he didn't know he could make, until he did. The cold on his chest seemed to spread, digging deeper and deeper into his chest. It didn't hurt, not really. It was just unfamiliar. It'll be okay, Technoblade. Just go to sleep. You are tired. Tomorrow will be hard, and then the day after will be easier. For now, just rest. Technoblade's eyes flooded, dark wing covering him and making it so incredibly difficult to open his eye. Don't. Technoblade managed to whisper. A hand brushed through his hair. Oh, I care so much for them. The coldness in his chest increased for a moment. Technoblade's eyes stayed glued shut. It's really hurting him. The idea of us breaking them. The sooner we get past this, the better. Right, then I'll have my work cut out for me, Technoblade heard Filsa say, before he heard the shifting of fabric. I'll be back quickly after I make a little mischief. Be safe, my love. Be back soon. Filsa responded, but Technoblade didn't hear it. He was fast asleep. He couldn't grab the curtain. He had been trying to, ever since he woke up alone in the dangling palanquin. Opening for the curtains was right there. He could see where his fabric split apart. He could see through it, though not clearly. But when his hands scrabbled over it, he couldn't grip it. He could feel the texture of the cloth. He could bump and shift it, but every time he tried to grab it, it was like his hand slid over it. At one point, he had gotten desperate and tried throwing himself at it, trying to not think about the consequences for if it did work. The thought of falling to his death was not any more enticing than any other thought of death. It didn't matter, anyway. It didn't work. The curtains didn't open an inch, and Techno had ended up sprawled on the soft ground, even more frustrated. Now the sun was rising, and Techno was panicking. What was he going to do? His wings shuffled at his back, and he cringed at the sensation. God, he had wings! Great feathery limbs sprouting out of his back, and as off-putting as that was, it wasn't the only change. His ears were pointed now. He had checked. His teeth were too sharp. His voice sounded wrong, and it was all his fault. He was so stupid. He wanted to go home. Techno grabbed another pillow and chucked it at the curtain. It was getting harder to do. His limbs were shaking at all the effort, and he was running more on adrenaline and fear than anything. He couldn't recall ever feeling this tired. He panted for breath as he reached for another pillow, a bead of sweat on his brow. It was ridiculous. How was he was used to running around for hours, sparring with Scappy in the yard, or racing Carl just for the heck of it. Why was he so exhausted? Why did he have so little energy? It was dumb. So dumb. Fairy rules were dumb and it didn't make any sense. Techno grabbed another pillow just as a shadow darkened the entrance. The curtains pushed back and Phil ducked under the fabric. What in the world are you doing? He chuckled, looking down at the collection of pillows that was stacked against the entrance. Techno nailed him in the face with a pillow. Phil squawked, startled but not unbalanced, and toppling out of the palanquin and splatting against the unfeeling earth as Techno had hoped. Dang it. Phil tossed the pillow to the side, gently kicking away the ones blocking the entrance. Mate, Phil started to say. Techno scrambled to try and grab another pillow to throw. You need to calm down, everything is fine. No! Techno shouted between heavy breaths. Everything is not fine. You're the Fae who cursed my family. You tricked me! Techno gripped a new pillow and flung it wildly, barely turning around before it was sailing through the air. It missed Phil by a couple of feet, but Techno didn't care about that as much as the fact that Phil was closer now. Techno? Stop! Leave me alone! Techno shouted breathlessly, rushing to try and get his legs under him. He was almost upright before one leg gave out, and he fell, catching himself on his elbows, with hair splayed in his face. It didn't hurt. The cushions and the fabric underneath him softening his fall. Techno flinched violently as a hand landed on his shoulder. He tried to twist away, but he didn't have the strength. That didn't stop him from flailing when Phil pulled him backwards, pinning Techno's back against Phil's chest. His wings tried to thrash, but Phil had expertly tucked them against him. Techno, mate, calm down. You're panicking. All you're going to do is hurt yourself. Phil chided. So? It's none of your business. I'll hurt myself if I want to. Techno spat back, trying to push back against Phil's grip, but his arms were pinned tight. He was pinned tighter the next second. Phil's arm squeezing so much he wheezed. No, you will not. Phil's voice was severe, his breath brushing against Techno's ear. Techno froze, not even daring to breathe. You are not allowed to hurt yourself, Technoblade. Techno gasped at the sound of his name, but didn't respond as something akin to cold water seemed to pour over his head. Except it sunk deep within him, flowing deeper and deeper until it passed against his heart in his chest, laying against his soul like whitewash on a wall. Techno sat there, quietly, trembling in the man's grip from fear and exhaustion. His lip warbled, but he didn't let the heat in his eyes overflow into tears. He couldn't cry. He couldn't. He could not. Phil sighed deeply and Techno flinched at the sound. He bit his lip to prevent a scared whimper when Phil's wings rose and Phil curled around Techno, holding him impossible closer. Phil's chin rested on Techno's shoulder, their cheeks pressed together. You're right. I am the fairy that made the deal with Queen Chesil, and I know you're scared, Phil said sadly. Techno swallowed hard as Phil's grip loosened to something less restraining, but no less possessive. I expected that when I grabbed you. This is all very sudden and I've tricked you. I've broken your trust, but I promise I'm not going to hurt you. Kristen is not going to hurt me. No one is going to hurt you, so please calm down. You're safe here. Techno bit his lip. I want to go home, he said, his voice crackling slightly. I know you want to go back, mate, Phil said gently, but I know you're smart and you don't know that isn't going to happen. That's not how this works. You are mine now. Techno trembled harder, not saying anything. Phil waited expectantly, but when the silence stretched, he sighed deeply. Techno flinched at the noise. Okay, here's what's going to happen, Phil said. Techno's breath hitched at the words. I'm going to let you go, and you're going to sit and eat breakfast. We are going to have a conversation, alright? Just a conversation. You aren't going to go running around and exhaust yourself till you pass out. I'm not going to allow that. I am more than happy pinning you under my wings for the next week if I have to. Do you understand? Techno nodded his head slightly. Do you agree to that? Sit and listen and eat. Phil pressed. Techno nodded again. Phil's arm loosened around Techno. His wings parted, and Techno rushed to get out of Phil's arms, putting some distance between them. Not far. He couldn't go far. He said he would stay, and he couldn't go against that. Fake and lie. And he wasn't human anymore. Techno curled his legs up to his chest and wrapped his arms around them. Instinctively, his wings wrapped around his shoulders, and Techno hated to admit that it was comforting. He dug his bare toes into the soft blanket. Phil smiled kindly at him. Techno hated how the sight helped him relax, just a little. Alright. Phil stood and walked a short distance, grabbing a tray that Techno hadn't noticed before. Phil set it in front of Techno, and Techno studied it. Assorted pastries were scattered across the silver with an ornate goblet of some deep red liquid that Techno hoped was some kind of juice. Techno's stomach growled loudly, but he hesitated before reaching for one of the treats. He could see the shimmer of magic around them. Because he could see magic now. Because he messed up. Go on then, Phil said, sitting less than an arm's length away from Techno. Techno glanced at him before looking back at the food. With a shaking hand, he reached out and grabbed one of the pastries, nearly dropping it, but bringing it close to his face. He examined it, turning it back and forth and watching the bits of magic shimmer around it. He had always been told not to eat fairy food, that if he did, he would never be able to eat anything else. Didn't matter anymore, because he had already messed everything up. He took a small bite of the pastry. It was perfectly delicious, but that made it so much harder to swallow. Is it good? Phil leaned closer, using one arm to hold his weight. Techno nodded stiltily, curling up tighter. I'm glad. Awkward silence hung in the air. Techno chewed his food mechanically until the pastry was gone, waiting for Phil to say something. Maybe demand he eat more, maybe demand something horrendous from Technoblade, like his family's names. The pastry sat heavy on Techno's stomach at the thought. Finally, Phil took a deep breath, scooting slightly closer. Techno flinched away when Phil set his hand on Techno's shoulder. "This will be the last day for Queen Chesil and King Beethan to play," Phil said. Techno looked at Phil with fear. "And it's safe to say that they will not win." "What? Why? Did someone lie?" Techno asked, eyes wide with horror. "No, no one lied, but they still won't win," Phil said gently. "Why? How? Why?" "You'll see. Maybe. But that's what we need to talk about," Phil continued. "Do you want to see the end of this? Do you want to be here when Kristen gives the final verdict?" "Of course I do. I want—" "You won't be able to change anything," Phil interrupted. Techno scowled, his wings bristling. "What's done is done, but some of the things said might hurt you. And the final decision definitely will. They will not win this, and I know that will upset you. If you don't want to see what happens to them, it wouldn't be hard for one of us to take you back to the palace. Granted, we would have to enchant you to sleep until we're finished with this, but you need to rest anyway, so I want to be there," Techno said, unwavering. "I don't— They can't still win. It's not over. And when we win, then we can't—" Techno cut himself off, unable to say the words. "You didn't think they were true, mate," Phil said sadly. Techno looked away from him as Phil's wings wrapped around Techno's back. "You gave me your name. Even if they were to win, and I was forced to end the deal, you would not be leaving with them. You're mine now, forever. Nothing can change that. You could let me go." "I would never," Phil contradicted. Techno buried his face in his knees, letting his hair curtain over his arms. He wasn't going to cry. He refused. It's just that. Just that. He was such a failure. How could he be so stupid? He should have known better than to give his name. And Felix wouldn't have done something so idiotic. He had made himself so the perfect tool of revenge against his family. And he had no clue how Phil was going to use him. Milo was right. It was worthless. "That's okay, Technoblade." Arms wrapped around Techno again, and he hated how nice it was to hear his name from Phil's lips, how it seemed to strike this very center and soothe the roughest edges. "It's a good thing you're mine. You'll see. I'll convince you." Techno doubted that. He did not believe that at all. "Alright, so you want to stay. That's fine. I was hoping, well, it doesn't matter. But you have to stay right next to me the whole time," Phil said, arms tightening even more. "You have to promise you won't try to get away from me. No useless running away. It won't work, and I won't have you getting hurt because you tried it anyway. So promise me that you will stay right here beside me or Kristen for the remainder of this session without trying to escape us." I Technoblade hesitated, his face twisting up with distaste. "I promise." "Okay." Phil hugged him close for a moment before pulling away, and Techno ignored the part of his head that was saddened by the distance. "We will need to move a little closer to the curtains. I can tell you from experience, it's a bitch to sit out of this thing sometimes." Techno did not snort at Phil swearing. He didn't, and Phil could not prove it, but the man didn't call him on it anyway, instead reaching a hand down to help Techno to his feet. Techno took it and stumbled a bit. Phil steadied him and guided them both closer to the curtained wall. Even that short distance had Techno wobbling with exhaustion, and he sat down gratefully. He was less grateful when Phil sat directly next to him, putting an arm over his shoulder. Techno glad, but Phil smiled innocently. Techno glowered and tried to move away and knock Phil's arm off, but he couldn't. He frowned in confusion, raising one hand with the intention to pull Phil's arm off, but his hand hovered, not doing what he wanted. "You promised you wouldn't try to get away from me," Phil leaned closer to say, shaking Techno's shoulder. "Remember?" "Huh? I didn't mean that. I thought you meant that." Techno stumbled over his words. Phil just watched him with incredible fondness. "You're still new. You'll get the hang of wordplay," Phil said, pulling Techno flush against him. Techno gritted his teeth and ignored the pleasant feeling of Phil's wing pressed against his back. "I don't want to get the hang of wordplay. I want—" Techno's voice suddenly cut off. He growled in frustration, rubbing at his throat when there was no noise. Phil patted Techno's arm and brushed his hair from his face before straightening the earring in Techno's ear. Phil's touch against the piercing sent a tingling warmth through Techno's skin. "I know you don't want this, but it's for the best, you'll see," Phil said, and Techno couldn't help but think, "The best for who?" But he couldn't voice his rebuttal. Instead, he slumped miserably, Phil pulling him even closer to him and wrapping both arms around him. Techno could just barely see movement beyond the curtains. People marched closer, blurred into dark shapes by the fabric in front of him. Techno leaned towards as much as possible in Phil's arms. More and more people streamed into the court, though not as many as the first day when Techno had come. Most still around were nobles, politicians, or guards, each watching somberly. Techno spotted Bad and Skeppy, both standing close together, looking worse for wear, but still much better than the rules looked. Techno's family looked ragged, taking their places. While they had easily sat proudly the first day, now they seemed twitchy and paranoid. Guards were kept close, ringing around the box, with many strange items in their hands. Fly swatters and parasols and nets, and one particularly irritable guard seemed to be holding a tennis racket. The royals weren't wearing very much jewelry, only their crowns. Their clothes were not as neatly pressed as they had been on the first day. They looked exhausted. But Techno also noticed the cloud of magic that hung around them, specifically around Felix and Mil. Techno couldn't help but slump in shame, staring at his siblings. They were doing everything they could to make sure his family could come out of this situation together and alive. He could see where his family sat in the little wooden box, one space left open and blank. He should be there. But he messed up. Vilsa tugged him back, forcing Techno to lay his head against Vilsa's shoulder. Techno wanted to scream and threaten and push against Phil's hold. But he promised, and gods. The weight of a promise was so heavy. How were words heavy? He couldn't help but lean into Phil, the promise feeling less crushing when he wasn't pushing against it. He really was worthless, wasn't he? He really had messed up. What if he had messed up so much that Mealy would be trapped just like he was now? Phil seemed so certain they would lose, even though no one lied. Was it Techno's fault? Had he done something to mess everything up? Or something else at play? Techno didn't know. He bit his lip, worrying at it nervously, and his wings twitching behind him with nerves. Phil's wing against his back was not comfortable. It wasn't. It wasn't. Techno was already so tired. "If you need to sleep, you can, Technoblade," Phil murmured in Techno's ear. "You won't miss anything." It will be a while before this begins. Kristen is going to make them wait. You have time for a little nap? Techno shook his head, blinking his eyes rapidly. He was not just going to sleep. His family were all trying so hard. He could at the very least stay awake. Alright. Phil sounded skeptical. Techno scowled weakly when the man started pulling his fingers through Techno's hair absent-mindedly. After a few minutes, Techno found himself nodding off, the weight of his head tipping forward, jolting him awake every few seconds. He twisted to glare at Phil, but the man smiled innocently at him. Techno was dozing lightly when Kristen finally appeared, standing outside with a veil over her face. Techno weakly raised his head, lizard blinking as she appeared. Well, here we are, the final day. And I see we have only, 50 or so people that need to speak. I had this brilliant idea, the Queen of the Fae said, Kristen's voice pushing Techno closer to sleep. It would have been so much faster to do this at the start, but why don't I just ask these 50 people to answer my question in tandem? All of them can answer yes or no at once. I'll be able to hear them all, and then we can move on. Gosh, this would have been cut down on so much of our time, wouldn't it, Queen Chesil? Yes, it would have, Queen Chesil said dryly. Techno looked down at his mother, Queen holding her hand clasped in front of her. We would greatly appreciate the speeding up of these procedures. Of course, it's a simple thing to wait, Kristen said suddenly, tilting her head. You didn't bring the youngest prince with you today? No, Queen Chesil said, and Techno was sure he saw a pained look across his mother's face. No, we couldn't. A shame. Well, I hope he will feel better soon, Kristen said. Now, if these people remaining would all step forward. Techno held his breath, sitting up idly, as all of the people formed a block close to Kristen's feet. They all shifted nervously, side-eyeing the neighbors as they waited. Now, do all of you believe that your lives would be worse off without the princess in your lives? The Queen of the Fae asked. A babble of assent from the crowd. Techno listening intensely to spot a lie in the crowd. So you believe that it is better for her to be in your human kingdom than in the fairy realm? The Queen of the Fae pressed. Once more, only assent without deceit in the air. Phil squeezed Techno tight for a moment, pressing his face into Techno's hair. I see, Kristen said, disappointment. What then? Only one group left to ask. I'm sorry? Queen Chesil asked, confused and on guard. What group? Why, family, of course. I should ask your opinion as well, shouldn't I? The Queen of the Fae said, and Queen Chesil relaxed. You are the ones closer to her. Your opinion matters as well. What kind of nonsense is that? Of course our lives would be worse without my sister. Flix stood suddenly. Millie beamed at her brother. She's the very heart of our family. We'd be lost without her. Pardon my son's rudeness, but he is correct. King Bevan patted Millie on the hat before standing as well. We put all of this effort into this before because we can't lose her. She is too important to us and the kingdom, more important than our lives even. We would lay it all on the line for her. Oh, interesting. Queen of the Fae said, tilting her chin onto her hand. And you, Queen Chesil? She is my daughter, Queen Chesil emphasized. My child, she is part of what gives my life meaning. I couldn't live without her, or any of my children. All of them will be going home with me, safe, alive, and together. Techno cringed against Phil, guilt heavy in his heart as the words tasted true. Phil rubbed gentle circles against Techno's arm. I see. What about you, Mil? The Queen of Fae asked. Do you feel so strongly for the family you have? The same sort of devotion they've shown you? Mil stood gracefully, even with her clothes being wrinkled and her hair not curling so beautifully as before. She was still a beacon of poise as she stood up straight, grinning widely. I was born to be a princess of my kingdom, Mil smiled. My family has given me everything I could want. They have showered me with affection, with gifts, with attention, anything I could ever need for my entire life. They have always made me feel as if I was the center of the world, loved beyond measure. How could I ever want to be anywhere else? How could I ever be happy with less than what I already have? So you think your life would be worse if you were parted from your family? The Queen of Fae pressed. Of course! How could any Fae have compared to what my family has given me? Mila said proudly. They would all be a lesser price. Techno flinched when Phil squeezed too tight, a growl in the man's throat. Techno looked up at the man in surprise. Phil's face twisted in anger. I'm not sure I agree with that last sentiment, Queen of the Fae said thoughtfully, but I understand your point. You don't think you could be happy without your family, correct? Yes. Would you be willing to give yourself up for this deal if someone has lied? The Queen of the Fae asked. Mil frowned. No one lied, though, Mil said. Phil scoffed next to Techno. That wasn't what I asked. Would you be willing to give yourself up for your family? To give up all the adoration and the affection and the comforts of being a human royal in order to save their lives? The Queen of the Fae asked. Mil frowned deeply before shifting her face into a vision of contrite honesty. Of course, I love my family, Mil said, her voice heavy with its sincerity. Techno cringed back into Phil, scrunching up his face at the lie. Phil patted his shoulder comfortably. Techno's jaw dropped as he stared at Mil, his sister standing there shamelessly, without any hint of suspicion that she had been caught in a lie. But wait. She lied. Techno thought his brain couldn't compute that. Which part was the lie? I see, the Queen of the Fae said, crossing her legs. Having heard everyone, I suppose I should summon a certain Fae? You mean? Queen Chesil brightened hopefully. Techno could see his mother press her hands to her heart. Queen Beethan was smiling as he pulled both Felix and Mule close to him. None of your subjects lied. No one. Honestly, I'm a little impressed by it. The Queen of Fae said. So the next step should be to summon my subjects. Who made this deal? Techno altered slightly as Phil stood, pulling Techno up to stand as well. Techno stumbled quite a bit, his head spinning slightly as he tried to figure out Mule's words. But they didn't have to go far. Phil helping Techno sit right by the curtain that exited the palanquin. He couldn't see his family from this angle. Only Riston was visible. Though I assumed you surmised that he was already here. He has been playing such amusing pranks on you, Queen of the Fae said, with a chuckle. We have not found them amusing, Queen Beethan said. Well, they weren't for your amusement. The Queen of the Fae raised her hand. one finger, she pushed aside the curtain of the palanquin. Unfiltered light shone in, and Techno shaded his eyes against the sun. Phil straightened, taking a step away from Techno and stepping through the curtain. "You're over mine." Philza dropped from the palanquin, the wings whipping out to their full length as he gracefully glided to the ground at the Queen of the Fae's feet. A loud gasp echoed throughout the crowd. A few individuals shouted once Phil suddenly appeared. "You!" Queen Chesil shouted angrily. "Him?" Scabby shouted outright. "Me!" Philza said brightly, wings fluttering behind him. He said something else, but Techno couldn't focus on it. He had promised to stay close to Phil or Kristen. Phil's over there. Kristen was on the throne. Techno wasn't near either of them, but he had promised to stay close. Techno slumped against the floor of the palanquin, unable to move from where the weight of the promise was crushing him. He gasped for air, not sure how he could relieve the pressure of his promise uncapped. A shadow covered him, and he didn't resist when he was lifted from the palanquin. He dangled for a moment over open air before Kristen set him carefully in her palm, covering him with her other hand and hiding him in the shade. He instantly felt relieved. The paralyzing sensation eased, and he could breathe. He looked up at the hand above him, mere inches from the top of his head. Kristen left a wide area open between her thumb and forefinger. Techno only able to see her veiled face through it. Could see a slight smile shimmering behind the shimmering cloth. Techno turned away, seeing the smallest hole between the fingers. He crawled closer, peeking out to continue watching. He was startled when Kristen spoke. "Enough of your bickering. I wish to hear what my lover has to say for himself." Techno saw everyone swivel around to face her. Phil glanced at what Techno was hidden by Kristen's hand with amusement. "Tell me, my beloved one, why have you created such a mess?" Phil didn't seem even slightly ashamed. "Well, my queen, a little over 2 decades ago, I had an idea for a gift for you," Phil said, his wings fluffing up. He strolled along, approaching where the human royals were now standing in their wooden box. The guards stiffened, some reaching for weapons that weren't there. The guards, with their racket, raised it threateningly. I thought to myself, my queen has everything she could ever want or need, but I would love to give her something to make her smile. And then I thought, why not a child? One we could love together as our own. Philza looked directly at Queen Chesil, the woman staring back with unblinking rage. I heard a human queen having much the same thought as me, about how wonderful it would be to have such a truly lovely child. We even agreed on what traits about children are so wonderful. So we made a deal. I would use my magic so she could have a child that was sweeter than honey, with eyes as bright as jewels and with laughter more beautiful than music. And in return, she would give me a child with those qualities, so that I could present them to you, to raise as our own, Phil explained. He stared directly at Queen Chesil, and she agreed. Her children wouldn't even exist if it weren't for my magic. Well, 2 of them wouldn't, anyway. A child is a wonderful gift, my love. Techno flinched when he felt Kristen gently pressing her thumb against Techno's wing. Techno resisted, leaning into the touch. His wings not getting the message and stretching to give her better access. But I told the humans that if each and every person they brought with them could testify that their lives would be worse off without the little princess, then I should break your deal with them. Such a thing would wound my heart. Phil sighed, placing his hand over his chest. Queen Chessel smiled at him smugly. It's a good thing we haven't heard from everyone they brought with them yet. What? King Beethoven said suddenly. Emil looked on in curiosity as Felix frowned. Who hasn't spoken yet? Well, there are actually two people we've brought that haven't spoken a word. Not just one. Who? King Beethoven demanded. Phil tilted his head. Did you forget that your youngest son isn't with you? Phil raised an eyebrow. I feel like that's a detail that should be hard to forget. Techno breath hitched. No, no, he couldn't be. He couldn't be using Techno's absence against his family. Techno pressed against the little crack of light in Kristen's fingers, trying to get his voice to work. He could do it. He could say the words that he needed to say if only his voice would cooperate. He turned to look back at Kristen, a pleading expression on his face. He could see the downturn of her mouth behind Phil, her thumb shifting to brush against Techno's face. Techno leaned against it, staring up at Kristen with a forlorn expression. Our youngest is sick, and Techno flinched and made a face, turning back to look through Kristen's fingers. You know we can tell you are lying, so it is insulting for you to keep trying that. Phil's voice was cold. King Beethoven grimaced, gripping the wooden box in front of him with white knuckles. Where is your youngest son? There was a long silence. The rules gritting their teeth before Queen Chessel answered. We haven't seen him since a party we held 5 nights ago, Queen Chessel said quietly. He is missing. We've had his guards look everywhere. We can't find him. How awful. It must be hard not be able to have your child in your arms. Phil said wryly. Queen Chessel glared fiercely at him. So, that's one person we haven't heard from. Though I think it's safe assumption that he would agree with his family. Aren't you curious about the second person? Who is the second person? Queen Chessel gritted his teeth together. Phil clapped his hands together in glee. Me! Phil half sung, half shouted as he took a taunting half bow. You brought me with you. That is absurd. How dare you? Before you get your shit twisted, why don't you ask your youngest son gods how they know me? Phil interrupted. He smiled brightly. It's a fun story, honestly. I will have fun telling it for years to come. You motherfucker! Abby suddenly shouted, only barely being held back by struggling Bat. What the fuck did you do to him? Where the fuck is Techno, you son of a bitch? Queen Chessel paled. Queen Beethoven moved to her side and setting a hand on her shoulder. Captain Scabby, what is the meaning of this? How do you know this swindler? King Beethoven asked. Vilsa snorted at the description, looking over at the fuming Scabby and Bat with amusement. We met him on the road, Your Highness, Bat said, still struggling with tears and with holding back Scabby. His cart was broken and the young prince offered to help. Then he invited Phil to travel along with us. We we didn't know he was a fairy. We didn't know that they brought me with them. Phil grinned. He spun to Queen Kristen. And what were your terms, my love? I will listen to the pleas of every person that you have brought. They must tell me how much they need the princess to be in your kingdom, not mine. If all of them can tell me that honestly, I will summon the one who made your deal and have them break the deal between you. If even one person you have brought cannot honestly say that their life would be worse off without the princess, then the deal will stand, and you must hold to your end of the deal or pay the consequences. The Queen of the Fae recited. Those are my exact words. Every person that you have brought, not human, not subject, but person, they invited me to come with them, traveled with me to get here, love. I even took the ferry. Phil excitedly turned to Kristen. The Queen of the Fae smiled at him fondly. That was fun. We should definitely travel on it together. Maybe a romantic dinner cruise or... Magician, how could you not have known? King Beethan roared, Bat quailing under the king's anger. Techno bristled, his wings puffing up. Bat didn't do anything wrong. He should blame Phil or Techno, not Bat. Bat's right. He tried to warn Techno. It wasn't Bat's fault. If you really think a human magician can detect me when I want to hide, you're delusional, Phil scoffed. Techno relaxed, slightly grateful for his father's glare, turning away from Bat. The magician did his best, honestly. The ward was particularly annoying. You're a rather talented magician. I bet you graduated pretty high in your class. What year did you attend? You're getting distracted, love, Kristen said warmly. Techno leaned against her hand, the love in her voice nearly overwhelming for a moment, scattering his thought. Right, sorry. Phil showed an apologetic smile. So, two things I can state in my opinion. The first, whether I not think the princess is better off in your kingdom or not. And second, whether my life would be worse without her. Techno glanced at his family. Queen Chesil looked sick. Queen Beethan holding her hand. Felix wrapped his hands around me tightly. The princess staring at Phil with an odd look in her eye. She didn't look afraid or worried. Instead, she smiled and looked. She looked. Surely not. Techno stared in confusion as greed shone in her sister's eye. Do I think that the princess should be in your kingdom or mine? Phil tilted his head in thought. Techno pressed his forehead against Kristen's fingers to get as close as possible. I would say yes. Stunned silent. What? King Beethan asked suddenly. Mila's smile faltered. You think she should stay with us, in our kingdom? Yep. Phil popped the P on the word. That's what I said. Techno wasn't the only one confused. Everyone in attendance seemed baffled. He glanced back at Kristen. The Queen of the Fae wasn't looking at him, only staring at Phil with an undisguised look of amusement. That's just... Queen Chesil said, looking at her daughter with hope and frowning at the obvious disappointment in Mila's face. You don't want the princess? Nope, I don't want her, Phil agreed with a sharp grin, because she would make my life worse. Honestly, a more rotten and more disgusting child I've never seen. What? Neil raged. Rage and disbelief in his voice. Which means, Phil sang, turning to the Queen, since all of those brought could not say that their lives would be worse without the princess, the plea shall end, the deal holds. The Queen of the Fae proclaimed, her voice echoing through the court with the finality of the grave. King Bevan and Queen Chessel must uphold their end of the deal, or face the consequences defined, in this case, the death of their entire family. Techno felt like he had been kicked. The air rushed out from him. Kristen's soft brushes against his wing went completely unnoticed. Wait! Queen Chessel shouted desperately. How could this be? I don't understand. He said he didn't want my daughter. Why is the deal still standing? How could you not want me? Emil shouted, disgusted. Felix turned her aside, whispering in her ear. Nope, I don't want her. Phil grinned wide. Why would anyone want an odious little toad like her? Then why don't you just break the deal? Queen Chessel pleaded. You're not gaining anything by keeping it. We'll be on our way, we'll leave you be. You would never see us again. But if I did that, Phil's smile was cruel. You would get away with cheating me. Queen Chessel looked horror-struck. And I don't like being cheated, Phil continued, stalking closer with a slow, determined gait. Queen Chessel tried to take a step back, but was stopped by the seat behind her. Besides, you seem incredibly fixated on foisting your foul princess on me. I don't remember our deal being that I have to take her. What? Of course you did, Queen Chessel said. You said that you would get a child as sweet as honey and give me a child as sweet as honey, Phil said slowly, like he was talking to a child. Well, I think both of us assumed it would be your second child. It was never stated as such. I only set a deadline for her adulthood, and since you ruined the princess, turning her into a worthless spoiled brat, she is not so sweet anyways. She doesn't fit the promise. Excuse me? Millie shrieked, Felix holding her back. I am incredibly sweet. Everyone loves me. Phil snorted derisively, covering his mouth. Millie blushed bright red. I met you on the road, dear Francis, don't you remember? Phil said, and he spoke. His appearance began to change. Techno watched as Phil began to look like, well, Phil, but the Phil that Techno knew, the human Phil, the one that gave him sweets and told him stories, not the one in fine tailored green clothes and wings stretched behind. Techno's heart ached for the time before this. I decided it would be best if I saw you before you came here, naturally trying to trick you into being trapped with me was only my right. So I had a cart in the middle of the road outside of the palace. Goods scattered about. You were supposed to stop, have a servant help me. I give you some food in thanks, and then you'd be on your way. Do you remember what you had your servants do? I Why would I remember something like that? Mila said nervously, glancing to the side at the gathered nobles. Techno choked on the words. The lie unpleasant against his senses, but the aristocracy seemed to react to the words as well. The nobles were giving Mila funny glances, blinking hard and rubbing at their eyes. Many frowned as if seeing something puzzling for the first time. Techno offhandedly noticed the shifting of magic around Mil and around Phil, like a rivulet between two puddles. Magic seeped from Mil and merged with the aura around Phil before the connection stopped, reseparating. You had them shove my cart to the side, breaking a wheel in your haste. You didn't want to waste even a moment of what was it you said? Drinking in the admiration of the low lives of the kingdom. You trampled all of the goods I had stored in it, And what did you do when you saw the destruction you caused? Phil crossed his arms and raised an eyebrow. Not apologize, not even ignore my plight. You laughed. I, a rotten heart with a pretty face. Yes, your brother is worth 10 times as much. Phil cut himself off by jumping backwards, just barely avoiding a punch in the face. Well, I did expect that. Get back here, you magic bastard! Scabby, stop it, we're causing a scene. Bad rushed behind Scabby, grabbing an arm and tugging him back. Scabby dragging him across the dirt. Phil watched them with amusement. We can't have violence in our court. I am not acting in violence. I'm just going to punch him in the face of law until he tells me where. Thick tree roots burst from the ground in between Phil and Scabby, creating a massive wall between them. Bad yelped and pulled Scabby back as the roots conversed on them, surrounding them, hiding them from sight. Techno's heart jumped in his throat. He banged his fist against Techno's hand over and over and over again, then tried prying her fingers apart, scratching at the skin to let it open, just to do something. Anything. Something to try to stop Phil from hurting them. His heart raced, his breathing ragged as he tried and tried and tried. Kristen's hand moved, blocking off what little light Techno had. He couldn't see. He couldn't see! They could kill Skeppy and Bad. It would be all his fault. They were just trying to protect him. Techno had to do something. Enough. That isn't helpful or necessary. Techno heard Kristen say. Techno responding heavily, a squeaky wheeze, while he banged his fist against Kristen's hand. His heart beat painfully against his chest. I'm just caging them in so they can't attack anyone else. Don't worry, they are completely safe. Look, Phil said, and Techno couldn't look. He couldn't see. Kristen had blocked the light. How was he supposed to look? A slip of light, and Techno threw himself at it, slamming into it uncomfortably. But he had to see. He slumped against Kristen's hand with exhausted relief. Bad and Skeppy were fine. The roots had surrounded them, creating a living cage, but they didn't have a scratch on them. Bad was dusting off his robe, and Skeppy glared at Phil through the bars of the cage. Techno gasped for air, feeling like he had run a marathon, placing his hand on his chest as he felt his racing heartbeat. Once more, Kristen's thumb gently brushed against him, and he sagged to lay on it, grateful for her interceding. He heard her giggle as he sprawled over the thumb, but didn't look back at her. Instead, he continued to stare between her fingers. Now, back to what I was saying. Your daughter? She's awful, but your youngest son... Phil tilted his head in thought. If you gave him to me, then that would definitely fulfill the deal. Techno? Neil said in disgust. Why would you want Techno and not me? Names, Queen Chessel said, incredibly frazzled. It's just a nickname. It's not like it matters. Milo waved off. But Techno's nothing. He's a nuisance. He always messes things up. He's undignified, unrefined. He's got terrible taste. Techno shrunk into himself, each word like an arrow against his heart, striking deeper with the lock of the seed in each syllable. His rings wrapped around him as he pressed further against Kristen's thumb. Hey, His Highness isn't any of those things, Bad shouted back at the princess. Mil looked over him in shock. His Highness is a great kid. He's funny and generous and incredibly smart. Mind your tongue, magician. I will not have you scold my daughter, King Beethan boomed. But you let her speak about your son in that way? Bad replied with a scoff. Well, no, I wouldn't dare. You shouldn't say such things about your brother. King Beethan sounded confused. I didn't say anything that wasn't true. Nearly threw her hands in the air. You know that Tech doesn't live up to being a prince. He's just kind, generous, smart. I think the magician summed it up nicely, Phil said coolly. A perfect prince, in my opinion. While you tormented a man on the side of the road, he personally helped someone he thought was in need. He fixed your act of cruelty and certainly charmed me. A sweet Charles, with eyes like rubies, and who I very much enjoyed making laugh. Neil scoffed, crossing her arms. So, Queen Chesil, would you give me your youngest son to complete our deal? Phil asked, tilting his head towards Queen Chesil. She glared at him, a hard, cold edge in her eyes. No, Queen Chesil said, I will not give any of my children. I already said this. Shame. Phil didn't look bothered. Then enjoy your last week or so of life, since you decide your family will die. Techno sucked in a breath, looking on in fear as Phil's words registered with the royals. Felix glanced at Phil and Kristen, and back at his mother with a pensive look. He stepped away from Mil and touched Queen Chesil's shoulder. Mother, Felix said, my answer is no. Queen Chesil shook her head. Mother, please be reasonable about this. I am reasonable. Will not give up. He will be fine, though, right? Felix said. Techno watched with horror as Felix licked his lips nervously. They said he would care for him, and the other option is us. That, all of us. What is one person being? No, I will not give them your brother. Queen Chesil glared at Felix. How dare you even think? We talked about this, remember? When we planned out how this would go? Felix said cryptically. I don't want to give him up either, but we've just got to do what's best for the kingdom. Isn't that what you always taught me? Things are different. This is different from the plan. He doesn't know. If we give him up now, we won't. The kingdom will falter without its leaders, Felix said resolutely. You would leave our kingdom to ruin. Haven't we lost enough because of sentimentality? Techno's mouth felt dry as he listened to his brother. No. No, it couldn't be. No, he couldn't be arguing for his mother to. They couldn't leave him behind. They wouldn't. He started aghast and frozen in shock as his mother's face twisted, eyes closed as if she were in physical pain. She leaned against the wooden box, head bowed in defeat. No, no, your majesty, you can't! Bat shouted, pressing against the cage. Skeppy following suit. He's your son, you can't just abandon him! Techno stared in disbelief, his heart breaking as he watched his mother steel her resolve, then looked at Phil, grinning face with wrath and regret. If it would fulfill our deal and save my family's lives, I will give you my youngest son, Technoblade. Of course, this is all a theoretical, because I already took Techno for myself. She interrupted with a laugh. Queen Chesil looked at him like he had smacked her. You can't give me something that isn't yours anymore, so. What? King Beaton shouted, enraged, but also afraid. He's already mine. You guys have no right to give him to me as fulfillment of the deal. He's been mine for days. Phil grinned happily, illusion shifting, and once more revealing his winged form. His cruel grin was so much sharper with pointed teeth. He was so sad at your little party, absolutely miserable, after some jealous little rat called him worthless. Couldn't let him cry alone in some corner. You had no right! You had no right to take him! Skeppy shrieked, banging a fist against the cage. He didn't belong to you. He ate my food. Phil stepped incredibly close to the cage. Skeppy flinching as Bad looked shattered by the words. Took my gifts. Gave me thanks. He was mine before he took a single step on the ferry. Techno's heart splintered and fractured even more as he watched Bad fall to his knees, tears in his eyes. Oh God, we failed him. Where is he? Queen Cecil said suddenly. Where is my son? My son, Phil corrected with a smirk. And he's here. He's been here the whole time. What do you mean? Skeppy demanded, his voice thick with emotion. Instead of answering, Philip turned towards Kristen, smiling up at her, and Kristen nodded. Techno was frozen in shock, not even reacting one. Kristen pulled her thumb from under him. Suddenly, he wasn't in the shade of her hand anymore, the sunlight beaming down on his head. He slowly sat up, crossing his arms over his chest, huddling into himself as every eye in the court was on him. He met his mother's eye. The pain he saw there, cutting him deep. A sudden gust of wind and an arm was thrown over his shoulder. Techno was stunned into stillness, unable to look away from his mother to see Phil's grinning face. The world seemed to move without him, locked in a mindset of denial and horror. He's been here the whole time, mostly. He's been asleep in my palanquin with me. It's quite exhausting becoming a fae. Techno twitched at the words. Phil smiled at him gently, pulling him even closer. Techno didn't pull away, wasn't able to pull away. It was as if he were turned to stone. He finally woke up yesterday, just in time to hear you say you would trade him away. Both Techno and his mother flinched at those words. Techno's heart ached as he slowly processed the truth of Phil's words. His mother was going to trade him. His mother would have given him up. Phil pressed a kiss in Techno's hair, combing his fingers through the pink strands. Techno might have leaned in closer, the gentleness of balm on his splintered heart. So, here's where things stand, Phil said. The deal is unbroken. Please, you owe me a child as sweet as honey. Techno! One whose eyes are brighter than any jewel. You son of a bitch! With laughter as pleasing as music, give him back. A child more valuable than any amount of gold. Phil said lazily, twirling Techno's hair around his fingers. And you owe them to me in less than a week. I think it's safe to say that you're fucked. The crowd looked up at Phil with rage and sorrow and fear. Techno stared back at his mother and he just wanted to apologize. He messed up. God, he messed up. He opened his mouth to say something, anything. But even if he wasn't spelled, he didn't know what to say. Not a sound came out, but he could see his mother's heartbreak written across his face. Queen Cecil began, I think it's time for you humans to leave, the Queen of the Fae said, voice firm and unrelenting. I have heard your plea and I am tired of your presence. Feel free to reside in the manor I made for however long you have left, or don't. You're free to leave at any time. But you will not be allowed in this court again. But you heard the Queen. Tino stared at his mother, looking away from her face, and barely noticed Slut walking in front of the group. All of you, get the fuck out. You are not welcome here anymore. You are trespassing now. Wait, please. Queen Cecil backed, not looking away from Techno's face. King Beethan grabbed her hand. tugging her away as multiple Fae stalked closer, looking incredibly unwelcoming. The human guards surrounded the royal family as the crowd was corralled towards the entrance of the court. Felix got meal after she tripped over a moving tree root, the tendrils grabbing her shoe and tossing it into the woods. Her dress seemed to catch on every twig, ripping the ham to shreds. Techno tried to pull against Phil's arms, even with the heavy weight of the promise suffocating him, but it didn't even take much effort for Phil to reel him back. Techno's whole body shaking with exhaustion and stress. Phil put him closer, murmuring in his ear, "It's alright, Technoblade. Just calm down. Breathe, mate. You're gonna pass out." Phil said, and maybe he was right. Maybe he was going to pass out. The ragged gasping didn't feel all that healthy, but he didn't feel able to breathe properly. Didn't feel like he had any control over his body at the moment. "Almost done. I know you're upset, and this is really hard on you, but..." Techno turned him out, staring desperately at his family, was herded through the portal. The other humans rushed out on their heels. It was only when the portal collapsed behind them that it really hit him what had happened. He shrieked soundlessly, thrashing in Phil's grip and trying to get away. The promise made him struggling feeble, but he continued to push and push and push against the feeling. Technoblade, calm down. Phil wrapped his arms around him tighter. "You're going to hurt yourself. You can't break a promise." "Let him go, you bastard!" Techno twisted to see Scappy attempting to climb the cage wall. "If you so much as scratching, I'm going to rip off one of your fucking chicken wings and shove it up your ass." "Language!" Matt shouted, but he wasn't distracted by Scappy's words. Techno watched as the light around Bat paused and shook, shaping and shimmering into a shape that Techno smelled more than he saw. It coalesced, feeling dangerous against Techno's senses. "Phil, I've got him." The arms around Techno squeezed tight and he was lifted. The air whooshed by, his hair billowing in his face. He instinctively held on as the ground got further away. Not too far, though. Philsa touched down just inside the palanquin, the curtain still wide open. Carefully, he loosened his grip to something less bruising. Techno punched him in the throat. It wasn't a good punch. Techno's whole body felt like mush, and it was a very awkward angle, but Phil choked, stumbling back and nearly dropping Technoblade. Emphasis on nearly. Arms tightened like a vice around him, pinning him in an unbreakable yet awkward hold. The air was forced out of his chest and Techno squirmed ineffectively, his feet not quite reaching the floor. "Enough, Technoblade," Phil said firmly. Techno shuddered at the name. "Stay still. You're not going to fall out of the nest." Techno glared at Phil and hoped the man recognized how little Techno cared about falling. Phil's irritation seemed to prove he got the message. "Technoblade?" Phil's voice echoed in his ear, twanging against the strings of his heart. Techno's breath stuttered. "Stop fighting me." And Technoblade stopped. Techno's head thunked against Phil's shoulder. Phil sighed deeply. "Sorry, mate," Phil whispered, slowly carrying Techno further away from the entrance. The curtains closing shut behind him. "I don't like using your name against you, but your safety comes first." Phil better be glad that Techno couldn't speak, because he would be calling him every foul name he knew. Bat would disapprove. At least Scappy had it covered. "Shit-stained son of a whore! I'm going to deep fry your ass and chuck it into the furthest..." "Enough." Kristen's voice shook the air, birds scattering. We have one more thing to settle between us, don't we, humans? Phil sat next to him, the same to, sat next to the same curtain as before, holding Techno against his side and underneath his wing. Kristen stood from a throne. Skeppy and Bart stared up at her with rage from their cage. You tricked us! You knew where he was! Bart shouted, looking a little pale. Techno noticed the magic around him seemed frailer, shredded. I never said I didn't, Kristen responded. If you recall, you never asked. You! Silence, Kristen said, and the very air seemed to quiet at her command. Skeppy and Bart both shivered. No complaints, that was the deal. You have seen the little princeling, he savored any being in existence. Our deal is done. Your price is due. Bart and Skeppy grimaced, giving each other a look, a world of communication passing between them before they both slipped in defeat, not looking up at the Queen of the Fae. Techno's breath stuttered erratically, his voice locked onto his guard, onto his friend. We are not going to hurt them, Phil whispered in Techno's ear, and Techno momentarily clung to the way truth thrummed in the words. They are yours. We aren't here to destroy what's yours. What? What is the price? Bart's voice hastily spoke up. Techno watched as he grabbed Skeppy's hand, squeezing it tight. Your gods love you, are you loyal to you? Phil continued to murmur. Have shown that they would give anything for you. Techno watched as the two small goblets formed at Skeppy and Bart's feet, a shining golden liquid inside that glowed like the sun. Skeppy took a hesitant step back, glancing at Bart for an explanation. Bart looked down at the goblet with confusion and startled compression. Drink, Kristen ordered. Skeppy looked at it, skeptically. What is it? Skeppy asked nervously, Bart bending down hastily and picking up both goblets. Does it matter? Drink, the Queen of the Fae said offhandedly. Bart frowned, handing one goblet to Skeppy. Such devotion is rare, Will whispered, from you and from them. So it is only natural that we do what humans look down on us for. Skeppy and Bart locked eyes for a moment, a silent conversation passing between them, before they raised their cups to each other, nervous smirks on their faces, and downed the contents. They are yours, and always will be yours, Techno said. Filza said. Techno listened with rapt attention. The goblets in Bart and Skeppy's hand dissipated. Your gods, forever. No one can take them away from you. Bart and Skeppy swayed on their feet, blinking hard. The vines around them moved, looming closer to the pair they had captured. Skeppy took a hesitant step away from the plant before tripping. His grip on Bart's arm pulled Bart down with him. The roots rushed to catch the duo, gently lowering them to the ground. Both blinked rapidly, disorientated as the sun shone from above. Techno leaned forward to get a better view, and Phil led him. Techno stared down at the ground below, Skeppy and Bart lying on the ground, wrapped in tree roots. Magic swirled around them both, different from how Bart's magic had looked before, constantly flowing, constantly changing, different. Both of their eyes shut, the chests rising with shallow breaths and the roots wrapping around them stilled. They laid in repose, small flowers budding and blooming from the roots, holding them down. Techno felt numb, staring at his gods, at his friends, trapped here because of him. Crushing guilt squeezed his heart. Scabby and Bad wouldn't have been in this situation if it weren't for him. Had he not been so stupid, had he been better, none of this would have happened. It was his fault. A hand brushed against his hair, the feeling comforting, but Techno didn't feel like he deserved comfort. He had messed up. He had messed up so much. His heart squeezed tighter. What did I do? Techno's voice cracked on the question. A single tear rolled down his cheek. What do you mean? Phil asked, gently grabbing Techno's chin to tilt his head upwards. Techno looked at him, miserable. What did I do that made you want to torment me? Techno replied, not a tear running down his cheek. Phil looked back at him, a devastated expression on his face. Techno, I'm not. I just wanted stories. I just want a friend. Techno's breath hitched and more tears dripped down his cheeks. I don't understand what I did for you to keep hurting me. Whatever it is, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please just stop. It's not like. Please. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Please don't. Techno's face was smushed into Phil's chest, cutting off his begging. Technoblade, I'm not mad at you. Not even a little bit, Phil said sincerely. Techno squirmed until he was able to breathe. I'm not trying to hurt you, I swear. I just. It doesn't matter what you're trying to do. You're hurting me. You're hurting the people I love. How would that not hurt me? Your gods have not been hurt. You trapped them. Do you think that they are going to be happy about that? Do you think I am? Techno spat vehemently. He tried to duck away from Phil, but there was no give. You're trying to kill my family. You're mocking them when they are afraid for their lives. You don't even need to kill them. You could have just waited, and you who wanted to have me, you could have waited and then. Techno hiccuped, a strangled warble of pain that sounded like a bird. And then you would have given me away anyway. Techno said miserable. They would have thrown me away. You didn't have to. They don't have to die. You don't want. You just want them to die. Phil didn't respond. He pulled Technoblade closer to him, rubbing his back comfortingly as Techno wept. After a minute of silence, Phil sighed deeply. You're right. I let my anger get the best of me, Phil said finally. I shouldn't have put you in the middle of my grudge with the king and the queen. That was selfish of me. For that, I am sorry. Techno paused, looking up at Phil with hope. Does that mean you'll break the... No. Phil shook his head. I will not release them from the deal. Techno deflated, looking away from Phil. Why not? They would be no happier if I broke the deal, Phil said sadly. And were I in their shoes, I would prefer death. This is a kindness. You should have just let me fulfill the deal, Techno said unhappily. You should have just waited for them to abandon me. I wasn't sure they would abandon you, Phil said. I know I never would have, and I was going to take that chance. What is done is done. I do not regret taking you, even if it hurts me, Techno said derisively. Phil sighed deeply. Even if it hurts you, Philsa repeated. Philsa pressed a kiss into Techno's hair, A spark of rage ignited in Techno's chest. "You won't hurt forever, Technoblade. Soon you won't even remember them." "Let go of me," Techno said, pushing against Phil's chest. "Techno, just let go of me. Please let go. I can't do this. Please just let go." Techno's voice rose louder and louder. "Stop touching me. Stop talking to me. Leave me alone. Leave me alone." Techno hissed, a dissonant sound, similar to a bow scraping across a violin. Phil flinched, his hold loosening around Techno, but not letting go completely. "Techno?" The hissing raised in pitch, hurting Techno's ears, even though he was the one making it. Phil flinched again, staring at Techno in shock before he resigned. "Okay, mate, I get it. I'll let you go and give you some space," Phil said. The noise stuttered a bit, slightly quieter. "But you have to do something for me first." Techno glad. Phil held up one hand in surrender. "It's really simple. All I ask you is that you lie down. You don't have to sleep. You don't have to do anything, but mate, you're exhausted. I need you to rest. You're eating at your own magic. That's not healthy. If you keep it up, you're going to fall unconscious for days. Again." Techno had no clue what that meant. Well, except for what it sounded like. It sounded pretty self-explanatory, but he was trying to do something like that. Maybe he did feel a little faint, though. "If I lay down, will you leave me alone?" Techno asked. "You won't bother me or touch me, or I'll leave you alone." Phil agreed. "I need to talk to Kristen and Schlatt about something, and it may take a while. If you lay down, I'll go do that. Give you some room to breathe. Okay?" Techno considered his options. "What if I say no?" Techno asked cautiously. Phil squeezed him close. "Then I'll use your name to make you sleep," Phil said quickly. "I don't want to do that, but as I said, your safety comes first." Techno considered his options, but there was really only one option worth taking. "I'll lay down. Just leave me alone." "All right, mate," Phil said, finally unwrapping his arms and wings from around Technoblade. Technoblade was suddenly dizzy at the last, nearly tipping sideways and face-planting before he caught himself. He slowly lowered himself to the floor, careful of his wings. "Let's find you somewhere comfortable to rest. I think some of the better pillows are over there." But between Phil walking over to get the better pillows and returning, Techno was already asleep, but not peacefully. Tear stains on Techno's cheeks, paired with the way he had curled into himself, made Phil pause to look at him sadly. Phil had quickly covered him completely with blankets and pillows. With a sorrowful glance, Phil moved to the opening of the palanquin, carefully pushing aside the curtain. He dropped. Flying high, he rushed up to meet up to talk with Kristen and Schlatt. If the deal made Techno so unhappy, maybe there was a different way to break it. Something that wouldn't leave his son heartbroken. For once, he might find Schlatt's opinion useful. He probably should have guessed that Philzo wouldn't actually leave him alone. Techno grumbled in his sleep, not wanting to move, even as he was being manhandled and lifted from the blanket below. He wasn't sure what wordplay Philza was using to justify breaking his promise, but Techno was too tired to care right this second. He just wanted to sleep. And Philza was being very careful, shaking him to try and wake him up. So Technoblade decided he would just ignore him and go back to sleep. Some kind of blanket was thrown over him, and that was nice. He was a bit cold now that he wasn't lying against all the cushions that made up the floor. Technoblade hummed in approval, even as the blanket was thrown over his head as well. He didn't care. I was there under the blanket. It was fine. Filza began to walk and the rocking motion lulled him back to sleep. Filza could continue to be weird. It didn't matter to Technoblade. He just wanted to sleep. A jarring bump startled him awake. Technoblade looked up in surprise, seeing nothing except red cloth hanging over his face. Huh? Techno said sleepily, trying to shake the cloth off to no avail. Shh. Stay quiet, Techno. Techno blinked slowly, his sluggish brain taking a long time to figure out what was off about those words. Felix? Techno slurred back in shock. Was this some kind of dream? Why was Felix here? That didn't make sense. Don't say my name. Techno heard his brother whisper back instantly. Techno's jaw dropped, his heart lifting. You came to get me? Techno's voice was a little brittle. He hadn't dared to hope that they would try. They didn't abandon him. Felix stopped walking. Of course I came to get you. What else was I supposed to do? Felix whispered back. Techno swallowed the thick feeling in his throat. It'd be so much easier if this forest wasn't so down. Can you walk? We can get out of here faster if you're on your feet. Yeah, I think I can walk. Techno agreed. Felix paused, allowing Techno to slide off his shoulder. Techno's leg buckled as soon as his bare feet touched the forest floor. But Felix caught him and steadied him. Techno grabbed at the cloth over his head, going to pull it off when Felix stopped him, readjusting it so he could see. Keep that on, Felix said. Techno looked up to see Felix also covered in a thick red hood cloak. It's enchanted to hide from fairy sight. Keep a hold of my hand, or you won't be able to see me. Okay, Techno said, holding tightly onto Felix's hand. Felix squeezed back for a moment before turning around. Techno followed Felix further into the camp, the stars completely hidden under the canopy of trees. Techno wasn't sure how Felix was finding his way, the man not carrying a lamp or lantern, but he seemed confident and resolute on his direction. Not that Techno was doing a good job following him. His bare feet were not even slightly bothered by the rough forest floor, but the exhaustion in his limbs, him tripping and stumbling gracelessly to keep up with Felix. The fifth time he fell, Felix huffed impatiently. He yanked Techno up by his upper arm, Techno wincing as his brother's fingertips dug into his bicep. Technoblade, we don't have the time to mess around, Felix hissed. Techno scrunched up his face at the sound of his name. It sounded flat and empty coming from Felix. So much better. And Phil or Kristen said it. Techno shook his head, trying to rid himself of the thought. I'm trying, Techno finally replied. I feel like we don't have time for excuses. Felix said impatiently, tongue Technoblade harshly forward. Come on, I know you've run twice this distance in half the time back at home. Techno's legs gave out again, shaking with exhaustion. Felix swore, and Techno felt guilt weighing heavy in his heart. Look, Techno, do you want to get out of here or not? Because I can take you back if you... No, I want to go. I'm I'm really trying. Techno said quickly, his eyelids drooped lightly. I'm just tired. Tired? How do you think the rest of us feel? Probably got the most sleep out of anyone. What do you have to be tired about? Felix yanked Techno to his feet once more. Techno's toes scrabbled for purchase on the dew-covered moss. Hurry up, all lives are on the line. I don't try, just walk. Felix cut in. Techno slumped, trying to focus on each step. He felt himself slowing more and more, no matter how insistently Felix tugged on his arm. The forest broke ahead of them, dim light streaming through the tight-packed trees. Techno blinked blearily as he watched his feet, his steps growing more and more unsteady as he walked. The trees were behind them, and Techno looked up. Techno flinched at the light, skewing his eyes closed against the lanterns the royal guards held. Each guard jumped at attention when Felix approached. Felix leaned down and tossed Techno back over his shoulder. It knocked the wind out of Techno, but he didn't mind much. He just closed his eyes and let his mind drift. His brother could handle whatever he needed to handle. Techno just fell into his exhaustion, grateful that he didn't have to walk anymore. Your Highness, were you able to... I found him. Quickly, let's get to my father. Time is of the essence. Felix ordered. Techno heard the metallic armor clang, the guards saluting their crown prince. Techno sank deeper into a haze of sleep, barely twitching as Felix walked. It wasn't a very smooth ride. Techno found himself blinking his eyes open occasionally, staring at his brother's back for a moment before drifting back to sleep. They paused, only for a moment. The sound of heavy canvas brushing against the fabric interested Techno enough that he stirred for a moment. Did you decide to use the tents we brought instead of the manor? Techno whispered sleepily to Felix. Felix's step faltered in place before continuing. We did. We weren't sure if we could trust the manor anymore, considering. Felix responded quietly. Techno hummed in response, unable to get more articulated response. He didn't struggle when he felt his brother shift him around, laying him on his side into something relatively soft. Techno blinked for a moment, looking around. Oh, he was on the couch. The inside of the tent was nearly as elegantly decorated as the Queen of Owl's manor had been, but that didn't make it sparse. Thick carpet covered the ground, and familiar chairs and tables were set about in a rough circle, pushed a little awkwardly to one side of the room. One part of the tent seemed completely empty for some reason. A section of the room neither decorated nor filled with furniture. He looked at the odd emptiness in confusion. He didn't notice at first that there were other people in there. You found him, a voice said, and Techno smiled. It took a second for Techno to find his mother in the room. Queen Chesil rushed towards them, looking relieved. Techno waved weakly at her, smiling. Hello, he said happily, and the sound bounced oddly inside the tent. He pressed one arm against the couch, trying to lever his tired body, but his mother quickly rushed over, kneeling down and pressing him back down into the couch. He grabbed her hand, holding it close to his cheek. Techno closed his eyes. I'm glad you're safe. It was hard to get out of the court, or into the court and out again, Queen Chessa said. It wasn't bad. The cloaks did their job. We are so lucky we commissioned these. They were worth the time and expense. Felix said behind Techno. It was certainly easier once he woke up. I was wandering around for a good hour before he opened his eyes. It was like the forest itself didn't want to release him until he agreed. That's probably not inaccurate, Queen Chessa said, taking her hand out of Techno's grip. Techno frowned, eyes opening to pout at his mother. Come on, Techno, you're not better than that. Don't cling to people. Sorry, he said quietly, feeling much less content without contact. He shifted slightly, wings pressing against the stifling red cloak in front of him. I miss you. Sweetheart, Queen Jessel said before cutting himself off. I missed you too. It's good to have you back with us. Techno beamed at her, contentment returning, when was suddenly interrupted by a large yawn. Oh, are you tired, Techno? I guess it is the middle of the night, Queen Jessel said, gently tugging his hair behind his ear. I just have some questions for you, Techno, and then you can sleep, if you want. We can handle everything from there. Questions? Techno asked, blinking at his mother. Queen Jessel cupped his cheek in a hand. Can't I wait? I'm afraid not, Queen Jessel said kindly, brushing her hand against his hair. I know it might be hard. I can't even imagine what you've been through. I Techno hesitated. I'm fine. Did the fairies hurt you at all? Queen Jessel pressed, looking incredibly sad. Techno shook his head. Did they treat you badly? No, they were they were nice, I guess. Techno said cautiously. They just I want to come home and they wouldn't let me leave and they were trying to hurt you and father and feet. No names, Technoblade. Techno flinched at how empty his name sounded. His mother didn't seem to notice. Did they ever say they were going to hurt you, though? No, they made a point to say they would never hurt me. Techno answered, confused. Why? I just I don't like the idea of you being in danger, sweetheart. Queen just said, a sad smile on her face. I'm always going to want you to be safe. That's what it means to be a mother. Oh, Techno said awkwardly, his cheek blushing pink slightly. His mother smiled at him before reaching up to touch his hair curiously. It turned it pink, she said thoughtfully. Like, properly pink. Mm, I Techno paused, looking at the strand of hair his mother held in her hand, enjoying the way the color caught the light. I wasn't actually awake for that. I haven't really looked at it much, but it's nice, right? It's the color is pretty. Queen Chessa said finally. She looked at it a little sadly. We don't really match anymore, though, do we? The Your brother still has his brown, but I'll admit I've always been a little jealous of his hair. You really did get blessed with a nicer hair than mine. Techno blinked at the admission, the truth of the statement throwing him. Oh, Techno said quietly, for a brief moment, mourning his brown hair. I'm happy to know you're safe, Techno. I was so worried they were trying to trick us about you being safe, Queen Tessa said, giving Techno one more pat before standing up. Techno looked up at her with disappointment. If you're tired, you should sleep, Techno. We'll be right here, not going anywhere yet. I don't want to sleep, Techno said, but his eyes were already shut. Techno didn't react to someone messing around with the cloak, pulling it further over him to act as a blanket. Just sleep, Techno, Queen Jess said, her voice breaking slightly. It will make everything easier. We'll handle everything, just rest. Okay. Techno mumbled, already more than half asleep. Love you. I know, sweetheart. Queen Chesil said. Techno frowned at the response, but he was already gone, drifting into sleep. He dreamed of something odd, something he couldn't quite describe. A series of sensations that was so incomprehensible that they left a strangely salty taste on his tongue, which was incredibly unpleasant. Like had been chewing on a large piece of rock salt for hours. His dreams were so uncomfortable that he half woke, listening with incomprehension to the voice speaking. It's really necessary. We already have the other items, the cloak, the charms, the salt. They shouldn't be able to find him, his mother was saying. What she was talking about, he had no clue, but the voice was familiar. Shouldn't doesn't really apply when we're talking about the Queen of the Fae. She's queen for a reason. She has been queen for longer than humans have existed. You can't take any chances, another voice said. And, oh, that was his brother. He sounded pretty frustrated. Father, you have to see the logic behind it. I see your logic, but we know that it will block him from using magic. That's a fact. Which means he won't be able to contact them until we can ransom him. You don't even know. Oh, if he can use magic, you're guessing. All Fae can use magic. He may not have control over it, but he might do it unconsciously. That would ruin everything. Can't have them steal him back until they agreed to break the deal. It's the only way. I'm aware of that, Felix, but I don't think iron is necessary. It will hurt him. And we already have other. Not permanently. It won't hurt him permanently. It would only be for a little while. And our deaths would be very permanent. Felix, you can't let our fear convince us to act cruelly, King Bevan said. Father, but, King Bevan interrupted. I think I agree. Bevan! We need to do this, Chesil. We need to make sure that nothing goes wrong. This is unnecessarily cruel, though. He's your son. Was my son, and I will mourn him from the rest of my life. But we cannot afford to act on sentiment. We are monarchs. We must act with reason, not emotion. Reason doesn't mean callousness. This is just sadistic. Mother? That voice sounded like meaning. Something in the tone had taken a frown. I know you don't want to hurt Techie. None of us do, but we've got to do what we need to survive. Techie would understand. He'd want us to do this. Techno groaned, the air feeling suddenly toxic and sick. Techie, seeing uncomfortable dreams would be better than this. He shifted slightly, trying to hide his face in the couch below him. The tense silence allowed Techno to drift closer back to dreams before it was broken. Felix, help me out with this, King Bevan said. Then there was the jangling of metal. Techno ignored the noise, fighting valiantly to return to dreamland. Firm hands grabbed one of his wrists, pulling his arm straight outward. Techno furrowed his brow, but didn't open his eyes. Something seemed to sizzle in the air around him, but he wasn't sure if he should be concerned. Sometimes air sizzles. Or maybe that was a dream. The same hands pushed against his shoulder, tilting him further against the couch. His wings pressed against the chair back, and he grumbled complaint. His other wrist was moved from where it was tucked under him. Both of his arms were held out straight. They were twisted for a moment, his thumb held level. Techno muttered another complaint, his eyes fluttering open and shut without seeing anything. Metal clicked against metal. A strange smell entered the air that had Techno scrunching up his nose. A loud metallic click and something cold pressed against his wrist. Techno screamed. Techno had once broken a leg, Carl throwing him after a snake had crossed their path. This it wasn't that. Techno had once sliced open his hand after playing a prank and stealing Skeppy's knife. This hurt worse than that. Techno had once nearly drowned in the pond, his lungs aching for air. This hurt so much worse than that. The sensation was worse than burning, than bleeding, than breaking. It was like it was shredding his very skin in 1,000 tiny places. Shredding at his soul, shredding at the very metaphysical foundation that made him. His eyes flew open, Techno was trying to see what was causing such pain and to get it off. Techno's voice reached an impossible volume, sounding neither human nor animal. He looked down at his wrists, hands still holding on firmly to his arms. Iron cuffs. He tugged against the metal cuffs, chains clinking for just a moment, as Techno tried to force his wrist out of the metal as quickly as possible. He was sure it would bruise or bleed, but the dull sensation of healing would be preferable to the undiminished agony in his wrist. Fabric was shoved into his mouth, muffling the ear-splitting noise he was making. Techno shook his head, trying to dislodge the hands tying something around his head. It was only then that he noticed who was holding him. Felix gripped Techno's arm, not letting up an inch, as Techno struggled to free himself. His father stood behind him, finishing the knot of the gag he had stuffed into Techno's mouth. Techno tried to kick at Felix to get him to let go, but Felix didn't seem bothered. He just yanked on the chain, connecting the cuffs together. Techno shrieked again, his voice cracking against the gag, as Felix yanked harder on the chain, pulling Techno completely off the couch, stumbling to his knees in pain and confusion. "Beethan!" Queen Jessel shouted. "This is unnecessary. This is cruel. Stop this now!" King Beethan ignored the Queen, wiping his brow. He quickly strode across the room, walking to the corner that Felix was dragging Techno to. The one that Techno had noticed was strangely empty. "It's for the best." "The best for whom?" Queen Jessel snapped. "Mother, it will be all right. All of this will be over soon, and then we can finally go home." Needle pressed against Queen Jessel's side, an unbothered, innocent smile on her face. "Besides, it's just Techno." Techno's breath stuttered behind the gag as he looked at his sister's smirk. "It's not like it's anyone important." She smiled sweetly at him. The king grabbed at empty air, red cloth appearing in his fingers as he pulled. Techno tried harder to pull away when he saw what the enchanted red fabric had hidden. A cage. An iron cage. Techno tried to stand, tried to dig his feet in, but he was still so tired. He couldn't get enough purchase to stop Felix yanking. He tripped and stumbled, his wrists feeling like they were going to blister and bleed. King Beethan unlocked the cage, pulling the door open, and then Felix threw him inside. Techno shrieked when his wings hit the bars of the cage, jumping back away from it and sitting firmly on the wooden floor. The door was slammed before he could even turn around. Techno stared at his family in horror. His mother had her hands over her mouth, looking horrified, as King Beethan and Felix picked up the red cloth off the floor. Meadle also had a hand over her mouth, staring at the display. Felix and King Beethan threw the fabric over the cage, completely closing Techno off into darkness. And Techno couldn't help but replay his sister's expression of poorly contained laughter. Ugh, I should keep him hidden until we can contact the Queen to give her out the hands, the King started to say. The ground shook violently. Techno shrieked again as the movement knocked him into the side of the cage once more. He quickly righted himself, curling up as much as was possible, trying to not brush against anything made of iron. A haunting howl echoed through the air, sending shivers up and down Technoblade's spine as he listened to the unnatural noise. It increased in volume, louder and louder, until Techno could hear the shattering of glass beyond the cage. I think they already know, Queen Jessel replied. Techno was past tears, he thought. He had cried so much the last few days, more than he can ever remember crying in his life. He was just so tired and sore. He had been laying here in the darkness for a while. He wasn't sure how long, stuck in a stupor of disbelief and depression. And his wrists, well, he had never felt something so agonizing. He glanced at them from where he was laying lethargically on the floor of the cage. Barely, just barely, he could see the shimmer of his magic, a flow of light around his whole body, at least. That's what he assumed it was. Phil hadn't actually said, but it stood to reason. Shimmer around magic food, shimmer around magic people, shimmer around himself. It was now magic made sense. Just at his wrist, though, where the iron shackles bit into his arms with painful tightness, he could see the shimmer dissolve and shred, like the iron was constantly dousing a flame licking at its heels. It hurt. It hurt so, so much. In a way he couldn't describe. Like part of his soul was being slowly pulled out of place before being roughly cut short. But it didn't compare to the wound that laid on his heart. It had taken Techno a bit to piece together what had happened, the words he had heard in his half-sleep state. But it was obvious. They were just going to throw him away. Again, ransom him for their freedom without remorse. Techno curled up tighter, his heartbeat matching the pulsing of pain in his wrist. And then I think it would be a good idea for me to go see Lady Alice. She has been my pen pal for years, and I'm so excited to see her. Techno shifted slightly as he listened to me prattle on. She was the one who gave me advice about how to contact the other ladies while I was basically imprisoned in the palace. I can't wait to meet her in person again and thank her for everything. That's nice, dear. Techno heard Queen Jessel say. Mother, are you even listening to me? Mealy huffed. I am. It's been a long night, sweetheart. I have a lot of things on my mind. Queen Jessel said sadly. Well, just focus on the future. Our days are going to be so much brighter now. And I was thinking, now that Techno is gone, I want to ask about using his rooms as an expanded jewelry room. I'm certain to get so many new pieces now that I can debut in society. Techno's heart twinged at the words. Now that Techno's gone, he's right here. He's Right here. Sweetheart, please. We can discuss this later. Now is not a good time for this. Why not? Your brother can hear you. Felix is outside with father. You don't have another brother. Means said heartily. Techno curled up even tighter at the words. Mil, Technoblade doesn't belong to us anymore. He's mature of that. Mil scoffed. He's ruined everything, and he's the reason we are in this mess. You should save your sympathy for someone who needs it. He brought this on himself. Techno had never been stabbed before, but he felt like the pain in his chest was comparable. Honestly, he was so ungrateful to us anyway. He always acted like we were the bad guys, when we were just trying to help him be better. I'm sure that fairy will realize just how worthless he is too, and decide to foist him off somewhere else. Said, sniffed derisively. How in the world could he even compare Techno to me? It's absurd. Techno listened with rapt horror. Not a lie spilled from Mil's lips. Gods, what if she was right? He had messed up, and now his family was throwing him away. What if Phil threw him away too? He hadn't even considered that. The fairy held him so close that he didn't think if his family got that way, Tingle would be used to break the curse. Phil had said he hated to be cheated, and Techno had chosen to walk through the forest with Felix. He had chosen, at least partially, to ruin the fairy's plan. What if Phil decided Techno wasn't good enough anymore? What if Phil decided not to be nice anymore? What would happen to Bad and Scappy? He had never been stabbed before, but it felt like was a dagger wedged inside his chest. What if no one wanted him? Techno blinked slowly and furrowed his brow. Something had shifted in the air. He felt heat touch his ear, a pinprick of warmth. And then it wasn't so dark as a faint, glowing golden and green light chased away the nearest shadows. The pain in Techno's wrist lightened. It wasn't gone, but it dulled and numbed quite a bit. Technoblade slowly lifted his hands, ignoring how the voices stuttered to stop outside as he gently touched his ear. The piercing feel had given him. Technoblade was fragile at the thought. Neil shrieked, and Techno heard a scuffle of fabric, the slap of feet against the ground, and the telltale sing of sword being drawn. Just when I think I understand the length of humans' audacity, you manage to dig yourself down to new levels. Techno gasped, the sound muffled in the gag. Phil's voice, as cold as winter itself. Tell me, if you hit bedrock, would you just keep trying to shuffle, or would you be content with the depth of your unremarkable graves? Your threats will not scare us, King Bevan said, his voice wavering slightly. We have something you want. You have something that's mine, thief. Phil's voice sent chills up Techno's spine. Why shouldn't I just kill you now, take him back? Because you will never find him. King Bevan shot back. Technoblade carefully pushed himself up, cautious of his wings brushing against iron. He shivered at the shadow of agony in his wrist. No longer overwhelmed, but still there. We have taken every measure possible to make sure that you cannot find him. I can tell. Phil's voice was bitter and resentful. A burst of warmth radiated from Techno's piercing, bringing more relief to the pain in his wrist, but also caressing against his bruised and bleeding heart. You have bound him in iron, someone you have claimed to love. You wrapped him in something that's so toxic to him. Toxic? Queen Chessel's voice cracked. Ethan, you didn't mention. We will need to make this conversation quick. Felix interrupted, his voice strong and sure, so that you will get what you want and we will get what we need. A bargain. Phil's voice was flat, but not devoid of emotion. Barely constrained rage evident in each enunciated syllable. Fine, state your terms then, spawn of fools. Name-calling will change nothing, Felix sneered. Our terms are fair. We give Technoblade back to you. In return, you will break the deal you made with my mother. You will not retaliate against us for kidnapping Techno, and you will make sure that all of the people in our kingdom will have a safe passage back to our home. A broken deal. A promise of no retaliation, and a safe passage. Phil sneered, his mockery lingering in the air. Anything else? The sun, the moon, my left shoe? That's it. And a veil as pretty as the queen's. His voice suddenly cut in. Hush, this is not the time for such things. Queen Jess's breathless plea was overshadowed by Mead's scarf. I will be married someday, and I deserve to have a veil at least that nice, especially after you insulted me in front of everyone. His voice argued. It's the very least he can do. The very least I can do, Phil repeated, tasting the words carefully. You're correct. That would be the least of it. I'd rather die than lose my child. What's is a pretty piece of fabric. I had assumed humans would think the same about their children, but I was mistaken. Exactly, so why don't we ask for more? Enough. Now is not the time. Who knows what tricks he would play? It's unwise to ask for trinkets, King Beaton said. Fairy, do you agree to our terms? Let me clarify them before I agree, Phil said, and the air seemed to shudder at his voice. If you return Technoblades to me alive and whole, after he is in my arms, I will break the deal he made decades ago. You will no longer be beholden to give me the child you owe, and death will not take everyone in your family. I will not retaliate against you for your rudeness, and all of those that belong to you and your kingdom will leave the realm safely. And I feel, Mille, Queen Chesil scolded, Phil scoffed. And the prettiest Phil for the princess's most special day, Phil mocked. I will agree to those terms. The air crackled, like a log splintering in fire. Techno shivered as the power of Phil's promise rolled over him. Evidently, the rules followed too. So, is that it? Is the deal broken? He asked hopefully. Is Technoblade in my arms? Phil mocked. Do you have a brain under all that pretty hair? Do not talk to my daughter that. Enough. Phil's voice shook the air. Where is he? Techno heard a scrambling behind the cloth. He hunched on his knees, looking at his hands as he braced for some change in light. He winced as the red cloth was removed from the cage. Jan realized how many things it was blocking from his sight. All at once, tiny figments and fragments whooshed into sight. He blinked slowly, trying to adjust. He didn't look up at Filza though. Was all this really necessary? He's a child, Phil said. Techno studied his hands. The veins were the color of ashes as they traced back to the iron cuffs. Twitches in his fingers sparked the earring to increase its warmth and glow. It wasn't as much to keep him confined as to keep you from finding him. King Bevan said, something like guilt in his voice. Unlock the cage for your for Technoblade. A twist of the dagger in his chest. Of course, Felix said. Techno didn't look up, staring at Felix's feet, and then his feet as he kneeled to open the cage. The key turned in the lock with a click, the door creaking open. Felix reached towards him and Technoblade flinched, pulling back slightly. Felix's hand hovered for a moment, before reaching again and grabbing Techno's forearms and tugging him forward. Techno bit the gag as the warmth couldn't quite erase all the pain of the movement. Felix's thumb gently rubbed against one of the ashen veins, pausing for a moment before he inserted the key into the cuff. It fell away with a clack and revealed a thick band of purplish-grey skin on Techno's wrists. But as bad as it looked, Techno only felt relief. Felix sucked air between his teeth, gingerly letting go of Techno's wrist and unlocking the second cuff. Techno felt a spike of irritation. Felix shouldn't be allowed to feel guilty over this. He did it. Well, maybe it was still Techno's fault. It probably was. It always was. Felix didn't so much help Techno out of the cage as he dragged him out. Techno was having trouble getting his legs to hold his weight. Felix didn't wait though. He held Techno up by his upper arms as Techno stumbled forward, before suddenly pushing him forward. Techno's knees gave out and he braced himself for hitting the carpeted ground. Arms wrapped around him, catching him before he could fall. Techno pressed against the warm chest. The green fabric was soft against his face. Gently, Techno was lowered to the floor, the arms still keeping him close. Techno swallowed hesitantly, looking up to meet Phil's eye. Warmth, worry, love. Not an ounce of rejection, no trace of anger. Techno's breath hitched, burying his face in Phil's chest, as the man held him tight, tugging at the gag, still tied round Techno's head with one hand. I'm here, you're going to be all right, Phil whispered in his ear. The tie was gone, and Techno spit out the fabric shoved in his mouth. Technoblade barely noticed the black rings wrapping around him, hiding his face in Phil's shirt, as another sob shook his body. Gods, I'm so sorry. You're going to be all right. Let me see your wrist. Thank the gods! This is finally over, Techno heard Millie say. Phil stiffened. I'm so ready to get out of this backwater country. Yes, the run will certainly be improved without your presence as well, Phil hissed. I urge the king and queen to leave quickly and to never return. Well, someone's a solo, is it? Millie giggled. Honestly, pride goes before the fall, or however that saying goes, and truly you and the queen had no right to be so prideful. Gosh, maybe you need to check an ego after all those years. Hush, Meadle, be quiet, Queen Chisel said severely. Clothing is not the proper. You haven't even given me a veil yet. Did your slow mind not remember? Meadle taunted. I thought they always kept their word. Techno could taste the roiling magic in the air, barely containing rage sizzling on his tongue, as Phil pulled him closer, pressing a hand over Techno's head. I'll give you your fill, Middle. Fret not. The deal must fully break first. Phil's voice held dark amusement. Middle's breath stuttered as the sound of her name. Techno tilted back to look up at Phil with shock. You! How did you know? You can't have known! Mealy shrieked, breathless, before her breath turned razor sharp. You worthless brat, Technoblade! You told him Do not speak to him that way. Phil's voice rent the air like thunder. Do not speak to him at all. He told me nothing loyal to you humans who would rarely to never show him a trace of unconditional love. He betrayed us. Who betrayed whom? Phil spat. Humans. I will never understand your inability to admit fault. But Technoblade never told me your names. Why would I not know the names of the beings made for my magic? You are connected to me. Always have been, and now? Phil shifted his wings, Techno being held in complete darkness. I'll release you from your deal, Queen Chesil, Phil said. The room was silent. I take back my magic. The air hung heavy with anticipation. Techno heard two dull thunks against the carpet. Silence. Then Queen Chesil screamed. Techno flinched at the noise, trying to wiggle away to see what was happening. Be still. You don't want to see this. You don't want to look. Phil whispered directly into Techno's ear. Queen Chesil's screaming turned into a heartbroken wail. Techno's ears twitched at the noise. My children got above. No! Please, no! Not my babies! Queen Chesil wailed. Please. Techno whispered back, his voice cracking with dryness. I need to see. I need to know what. You didn't do this, mate. This isn't on you. Phil whispered back. This is 100% not on you. Please. Techno whispered again, tugging on Phil's shirt. I need to know. Phil didn't say anything for a long time before he sighed. Just the barest bit. His wings shifted, giving Techno a view of of the royals. Queen Chesil was clinging to Felix's sprawled body, his brown hair the same shade as her own. He stared with glassy brown eyes at the ceiling of the tent, completely still. His crown lay inches away from his forehead. King Beaton cradled Meadle in his arms, staring down at her with silent shock. He didn't move, didn't speak, didn't cry, just stared and stared and stared. Neither Meadle nor Felix were breathing. Techno cringed against Phil, guilt heavy in his heart. Come on, mate, Phil said gently, helping Techno stand. Phil took most of his weight. Techno's leg not able to hold him. Not to get you home. No! Techno flinched at Queen Chesil's shout. No, you will not take him. Take? You gave him to me. Remember, feel that bend. Twice. Techno's heart ached. Phil pressed his wings harder against Techno's back. You killed my children! You broke your deal! You said you wouldn't retaliate and you... This was always going to happen if I ended the deal. Feel glad. They were partially made of my magic. If you upheld your end of the deal, the spell would be complete and they would be completely separate from me. But you didn't. So my magic returned to me. No, no, that can't be. My threat to kill you all was mercy, Phil explained, brushing his hand over Techno's head. I would rather die than see my child's end, but that was your choice. Live with it. Please, no, Technoblade! Technoblade, come here! Queen Jessel demanded frantically. She let go of Felix's body and reached out to Techno. Please, come to your mother. We can go home. Don't speak to him. Please, please have heart, have mercy. Queen Jessel backed, hands folded together in front of her as she kneeled. He's all I've left. Don't take him as well, please. Techno met his mother's eye, the pain there stirring something in his chest. He stared at her, conflicted and conscious of Phil's arm wrapped around him, the fairy's wings pressed comfortably against his back. Techno stared at her a moment longer, before turning away and pressing his face into Phil's shirt. You threw him away first, Phil said, not quite able to hide how pleased he was. It's your own fault you didn't see him as the miracle he was. Deal with the consequences. Techno clung tighter, his mother's tearful begging grating against his ear. He twisted enough so he could speak and actually be heard. I want to go home, he said flatly, pulling closer to Phil, and Phil wrapped his wings around tighter. The light was gone. He couldn't see Queen Chettle anymore. All right, mate. Let's go home. Phil said gently. Techno felt himself lifted completely off the ground, arms wrapped under his knees and wings. Techno pressed his face against Phil's collarbone and shut his eye. The sound of a woman screaming left far behind as the wind brushed the tears from his cheek. Technoblade was tired of waking up annoyed, but it was Phil's fault this time, so he was going to make the man suffer. Mate. Phil snorted, trying to pry Techno's fingers from his shirt. Techno gripped tighter. I'll be right back. No. Techno mumbled, not even opening his eye, as he quickly grabbed once again. Phil managed to free himself from one hand. Not allowed, denied. Techno? Nope. Techno said again, walking closer so he could wrap an arm around Phil's waist, vetoing it. You're not going anywhere. Technoblade, Phil said fondly. Mate, I'm only going to be gone for a few moments. You're not going to be gone at all. You're staying right here, Techno said stubbornly. Phil laughed, laying back down. Techno smirked at his victory, throwing his arm over Phil's chest and peering him closer. Phil's responding kind, pulling an arm over Technoblade, careful of his wings. The fairy gently preened some of the feathers. I didn't know you were so clingy, mate. Phil teased. You've been trying to get away from me ever since I took you. I can stop if it's... No, Phil said, resting his chin on Techno's head. No, I'm not complaining, not at all. This is what it should be. Once Kristen is finished gathering her new subjects, she's going to love this, just as she loves you. Techno's heart soared at the words, the love knitting together the wounds on his raw heart. But A bubble of doubt rose in that heart. You won't abandon me, right? Techno squeezed tighter around Phil. Never. Phil swore, I would never throw you away. Techno heard the truth in his words, but still, Phil said. Technoblade tested the word. Something thrummed at the sound, and Technoblade looked up to see Phil's shocked expression. You're not allowed to throw me away. Philza blinked for a moment before he gently grinned wide. His laughed loudly, squeezing Technoblade so tight he couldn't breathe, but Technoblade grinned wide as he listened to Philza laugh. Oh god, you're a menace. Oh, my perfect little bird. Philza laughed. It only took you, 2 days to figure that out? So small. Feels Kristen's going to have a field day. Techno blushed brightly, hiding his face in Phil's shirt. How about when you're not being a sneaky manipulative little shit? You just call me dad. Phil's continued to giggle. Does that sound good to you? Techno shifted slightly so his words could be heard. Sounds perfect. Once upon a time, there was a king and a queen. A good king, a good queen, but not anything more than good. They made many mistakes in their reign, mistakes that seem obvious in hindsight, but were not made out of malice, mistakes that cost them everything, yet left them with the same amount they had at the start. A king and queen left the fairy realm with an entire kingdom in tow. They left their kingdom with many fine horses, but when they returned, one was unaccounted for. They left their kingdom with many skilled guards, but when they returned, two were missing from their number. They left their kingdom with many, many servants, but when they returned, they lost count of how many were lost. They left their kingdom with 3 children, but when they returned, they only had hearts full of woe and 2 pine boxes, with one pretty corpse wrapped in the most beautiful shroud, a veil to see her on a most special day. And the queen lived. Happily? No. But then, their story was never meant to be perfect. And, well, there it is. My first ever completed Podfic, standing around 8.5 hours. Huh. Um. Well. Um. After this fic, I'm going to start another fic, of course, but different fandom. I'm Sneaky Marauders. Um. And more than just thinking, I've already started recording the first episode. Um. And well, so that's coming up. Uh, it leads me to think I don't actually remember how long those chapters were, so let's hope for the best, because if it wasn't for the fact that I took some free time, I wasn't going to be able to, record this, so
Maybe you're going to see chapter split up, but that's fine. Um, I hope you all enjoyed this one. I had a lot of fun making it. Yeah, thanks.